Good evening. Welcome to the District 225 Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, would you please read the roll?
Mr. Dowdy.
Here.
Mr. Glowacki.
Present.
Mr. O'Hara.
Here.
Ms. Seguin. Here. Mr. Shine.
Present.
Dr. Steinberg.
Present.
Mr. Taub.
Here.
Item 2 on our agenda is approval of our agenda for the meeting. I believe there's going to be one modification. Mr. Glowacki.
Yeah, so I move that the agenda gets approved with item 9 being moved up after item 5 on the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Move to item 3 on our agenda, which is the recognition of community visitors portion of our meeting. This is the 30-minute portion of our meeting where we invite the community to address the board. We have asked the people who want to address us tonight to have their names on the list. I do see they will require more than 30 minutes. We will in fact allow everyone to speak who has put their name on the list. We do ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes and conclude promptly. At the end of the 2 minutes, you will hear a bell and we'll ask you to please let others have a chance to speak. That will keep us moving because we will be going significantly over the 30-minute period. Please be aware that the board listens very carefully to everything you say. We don't generally engage with you at that time, but there are other parts of our meeting. We will hear discussions of issues often that you raise during your comments. I know this, many of you here have interest in the masking question, and that is certainly something that will be discussed in various parts of the meeting as we get further into the agenda. We ask that everybody remain civil and respectful when they're speaking, and that they are acting politely in all ways. We also want you to be aware that we cannot discuss particular employees or students due to privacy and confidentiality concerns. We do ask per the Illinois law that you keep your masks on while you're in this room and in the building, as well as when you are speaking. And finally, I want to remind everybody that this board follows the law, and that law comes in statutes, regulations, orders, mandates, and applicable court orders. We are fully aware of the many things going on right now with masks in Sangamon County, up in the appellate court, Governor Pritzker's executive order, Cook County's mandate. We are watching all of those developments very, very closely. At the meantime, we are continuing as we've communicated with our community, enforcing the law, keeping our schools open for academics, activities, athletics, and the arts as always. We will be, as I said, talking about these topics a little bit further into the meeting, but I wanted to address that squarely up front so you understand the context. So we look forward to hearing from you this evening, and I will call you up one by one per the list. With that, I will ask our first speaker who listed her name. If you'd like to join us for up to 2 minutes, Elizabeth Preston.
I want to introduce my daughter, Elizabeth Preston. I'm her mother, Jennifer Preston, and we live at 735 Normandy Lane. My husband is also with me. Elizabeth has prepared something longer than 2 minutes, so if time goes over, my husband or I will either pass on our time and to allow Elizabeth to continue speaking.
But do try, I understand we're trying to, but just try to keep it close to 2 minutes. And we have
The three of us have all signed up.
I understand, Ms. Preston. I appreciate that.
I would have much preferred to email this, but I had little confidence you would take the time to read a student's perspective. So I stand in front of you today in hopes to get my message across. As you are all aware, there have been many lawsuits regarding the school mask mandates and the governor's mandates. I've been watching over social media, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, more of many neighboring school districts that have provided the opportunity to go maskless. As a society, this is a huge step in the return to normalcy. Our world has been in a corrupt and unnatural state since the COVID-19 pandemic started. It has taken away the lives of so many growing individuals. Not only did it affect our world as a whole, but so many people have had their lives destroyed and ruined due to the incomprehensible and unjust ruling that has taken place with decisions based on fear instead of statistical evidence. I had my skating career ripped out of my hands as they feared my unvaccination status. They took my passion and crumbled it into pieces. They refused to attempt any effort to understand or acknowledge my medical exemption. Rather, they labeled me a danger to the team. They not only ruined my hopes of skating in college, but they demoralized me as a person and took away my freedom of speech and choice. And most importantly, my right to be a kid. As of right now, the people who are in charge of not only Glenbrook South, but the district as a whole have treated me and my peers the same. You've dehumanized us. You've treated us as if we were pawns and did not know the difference between right and wrong. You've treated us as if we had no say in our rights or actions. All of you have demonstrated to me that you are not people I can trust. And according to one of your school board members, I am more of a threat than a knife-wielding student. I've never been in one of the many fights at our school. I've never threatened a peer due to an outside of school matter. I've never threatened a school shooting, nor have I written a song about my hopes of shooting and killing others. How does being unvaccinated for medical reasons make me more of a threat than a violent student who is placing staff and students on high alert? How does being unvaccinated make me more dangerous than a mentally bruised individual? If you were told that you to be treated like a threat due to the medical decision you make with your doctor,
Just go ahead and continue a little bit longer.
how would that make you feel? At the start of COVID, everything was unsure. However, as time went on, data became available. More and more doctors are coming out and declaring ideas that have stated long ago. Studies have shown that peers my age are far less likely to pass away from COVID. It is more those who are underlying medical conditions or of a much older age. Studies have also shown the continuous negative impact the masks have had on health issues. Personally, I suffered from a mono and staph infection in my throat from masking. I figure skate in a mask for hours a day and then attend school for another 7 hours. It is unhealthy and wrong, according to the judge that overtook the case last Friday. As a school district, you need to stand up for your students. You need to stand up for what you think is right. If you will not get rid of masks altogether, then allow for masks to be optional. If people choose to wear masks, they should be allowed to do so. However, as someone who has suffered from many health issues regarding these masks, I should have my own choice and ability to advocate for myself and do as I wish. I shouldn't have to wear a mask under the guise that it is needed to protect others. I shouldn't have the fear of being guilt-tripped by my peers and my teachers. I should not have to constantly hear the ridicule of not doing my part. I should not have to put up with the rude remarks I hear in the halls by teachers. We students don't deserve this. I know many who are not afraid to stand up to the school board. I know of many students who are done being treated as if our feelings do not exist. I know of students and families who will do anything to advocate against the misguided individuals on our school board. Our school board is running our education into the ground. The covering of lies from the scandal over the summer, the unexpected student fights, the interview that deemed unvaccinated to be unsafe. You are the reason our school is suffering, and you are the reason fights are breaking out. You are the reason so many students come to school and dread the prospect of making it through another day. Preaching about mask wearing and how far it should be above my nose does not help the mental aspect that you are supposedly trying to help. Mental health in our school district alone has declined. It is shown through the mass amounts of fights and drugs that happen. It is shown through the declining grades and unfocused eyes. It is shown.
Ms. Preston, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to conclude.
2 more minutes. There are
Yeah.
3 of us up here.
Well, I'm sorry, in
Yes,
fairness,
2 more minutes.
that's not part of our
and I will
rules, ma'am.
finish for her.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's fine.
As a school board, it's your responsibility to stand up for your students. It's your responsibility to advocate for what's right. It's your responsibility to take accountability for your actions. I should not have to be reading this out to you in desperation. I should not have to be protesting against the school I should be protected in. I should not have to be standing up for myself when my own school board will not do so for me. Many students and parents are already planning protests against the school. It's your job to listen to these voices and answer these children's requests. Follow the surrounding schools. There are more than 500 plus school districts that have gone mask optional since last week. Acknowledge the lack of statistical risk to our students and listen to the judges that you claim have no effect over you. Ask yourselves, how can the governor state he is eliminating mask mandates almost everywhere, but doubling down on the need to mask kids in schools? The part of our community that needs normalcy the most, and the part that is proven time and time again to be the least at risk population. You are representing that it is more important for adults to get their social lives back while continuing to ignore the emotional developmental needs of our students. Are you really that misguided? You are driving our community, education, and hope for all these young students into the ground. People are waking up, and we beg of you to please wake up and do what's right for these kids as well. Thank you, Elizabeth Preston, Jennifer Preston, and Jeff Preston. Here's Elizabeth's speech.
Thank you, Mrs. Preston, Mr. Preston, Ms. Preston. Thank you, Ms. Preston. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My next call, Harlan Warnsman, did I say that correctly?
It's cool if I move it.
If you can move the microphone, just thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Harlan Myers, and I'm a junior at Glenbrook South High School. First, I'd like to commend the board for continuing to follow the science while also promoting a safe in-person learning environment for all students and staff at both GBN and GBS. I'm here tonight to state my support for the board to continue following the science and to keep the mask mandate in place. To start, I think it's important to talk about the state of COVID in our district. Our current district 225 metrics show us to be more than double the threshold considered substantial concern. Our total cases still haven't dipped to the levels of fall 2021, and that's without weekly mandated testing that would likely reveal our numbers to be higher. At the end of the day, I think mostly everyone in this room would agree that in-person education is the top priority, and the cost of wearing a mask is simply worth the opportunity to continue having in-person learning. As mid-January proved, a sharp rise in cases can jeopardize that opportunity, something that we are all hoping to prevent. And to prevent a sharp rise in cases, in-school masking is key. A CDC study of Arizona released in the fall of 2021 concluded that schools without mask mandates were 3.5 times more likely to have a COVID outbreak than those with mandates in place. With the potential of a new variant in spring break in just over a month, this is a risk that we cannot afford to take. I urge the board to make decisions not based on impatience, but off of information and scientific data, all of which concludes that it's important to wait and see as the COVID situation, until the COVID situation improves, before making landmark decisions that could alter the ability to have safe in-person learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warnsman. Next call, Ruth Baruch, sorry. Also, just for everyone, I omitted to say, if you want to give your name and your address, it helps us follow up. You don't have to, but if we have to follow up, that does help us.
Hi, it's Ruth Baruch. So I'm a parent of a junior high school and a high school student in the Glenbrook area. And I truly, truly appreciate the school board and the difficult job you are doing right now. I think it's very commendable. I'm not going to talk about the real science. I think a lot of people are. I'm going to talk about common sense, or rather the science is common sense, science from doctors. But I feel this concern of whether to wear a mask or not is about our community. This is about caring for each other. I understand that some of our children are negatively affected by wearing a mask, and I am truly sorry. No, it's not fun. I don't like it either. I do believe the impact would be far worse if they thought they were the one to give this virus to a friend, a family member, or your friend's family, or a teacher, and they don't recover. Can you imagine your child's teacher not recovering and that child doesn't say it, thinking that maybe they gave it to them? That would stay with them forever because they had the ability to try and prevent this. I've asked my kids if they or any of their friends have been negatively or emotionally affected by wearing a mask. They all look at me like I was nuts. Like, it's a mess. This is what we're supposed to do right now. I am not immune compromised, nor is my family, but I know many who are. They can't even take a chance coming here because this is too many. In fact, I don't go in a room with this many people either, because I take care of seniors and they are immune compromised. I have 4 people in their 90s. I did get COVID. I couldn't work for 2 weeks. I don't get sick pay. So I lost all my pay because I can't take a chance of hurting them. It's wrong. Again, it's about our community and caring for those who would not be able to fight this virus. For those children that are severely impacted by wearing masks, I don't want to minimize their stress. It's up to us as parents to teach them that we are protecting others by wearing a mask, even though it is difficult. That they can be a hero too by doing this. We need to teach them to care for others. If we all do it together, then it's not so hard, no matter how long this lasts. It's not about you, it's about us, all of you. Thank you for your time, and please stay strong.
Thank you, ma'am. The next person to speak is Amy Gust.
Hi, I'm Amy Gust. I'm at 2636 Cherry Lane. I have a senior and a sophomore. And again, also I'd like to thank the board for struggling through what has been, I'm sure, a very, very traumatic time and really above and beyond and unprecedented things to have to deal with. As I've mentioned before, when I've spoken before you, I'm a physician here on the North Shore. And through my practice, I do get a sort of a front row seat to some of the worst effects of the pandemic and how people have been suffering. I think the biggest issue now in terms of the mask mandate is I would love to take off my mask as much as anybody else. I don't like wearing it. I actually like it way less than my kids do. But it's not time yet. And if we prematurely remove the mask mandate, we're going to increase transmission in schools. The prevalence of COVID in our community is still very high. And if we're increasing the transmission in schools, we will then be increasing the number of students who have to miss school, miss performances, miss practices, miss games, miss tryouts. And I think our goal right now should be to keep as many students in school as much as we can. I mean, I think that's got to be the goal of the board. And the board is not supposed to be listening to the majority of, even the majority. I believe that I'm in the majority. I believe the majority of families and children in this community are for protecting others. However, regardless of whether it is, we should be listening not to the majority, but to the experts. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, the IDPH, the CDC, all still recommend masking in schools to protect our children, our families, our communities, and our education system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gust. Parker Krebs.
Hello, thank you all for letting me speak. I'm going to hit you rapid fire tonight with 10 reasons why we should keep masks in our schools. I'm not going to provide a lot of in-depth speaking as some of our subsequent speakers will speak to that, but I'm going to give you 10 reasons. Number one, if you've ever walked in GBS or GBN during passing period, you know there's no social distancing. We hit our shoulders on every single student. There's no such thing as social distancing. If masks go away, what do we do about that? Number two, we had our biggest surge after winter break. How do we know what's going to happen after spring break? I don't think we want to jump the gun and see what happens. This isn't the kind of thing where we should play around and find out. Number three, masks are not harmful for teenagers. I don't think I really need to specify that, but I guess I do. Number four, the district has been strict on following the CDC and IDCPH guidelines, as we always have. If we went against those guidelines, I don't know if that would be such a good idea, as those are the actual health experts. Number five, the positive numbers in our community are low because we have more at-home testing. Now everybody is able to get 4 at-home tests for free. Tests aren't being reported at such a high rate because people just go to Walgreens, they buy their test rather than going to test center. Number six, in order for masks to work, everybody needs to wear them. Number seven, it's important to keep schools open. We don't want to go to remote learning again. Number eight, it's not about just the students. It's about our family members. My mom is battling cancer. My dad was just in the hospital for lung issues. This isn't just about the kids. I know it's safer for us, but for parents. Number nine, we have a petition going. We have over 1,100 signatures to keep masks in school. The other petition has about 150 less. We have almost 1,100 signatures. Number 10, you saw last time how I was ridiculed. I was yelled at. Someone the other day got an anonymous letter in the mail, hate mail, anonymous, with a threat. This is crazy. What kind of message does it send to our students, my peers, if we let the bullies get exactly what they want? I've been ridiculed online. What kind of message does that send to our peers? I appreciate you guys. Thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krex. I'm going to call next Anish or Anish Dana, and I'm sure I didn't get that quite right, and I apologize.
No worries about it.
Thank you.
You'll have another chance to practice. So
I love it.
I'd like to start by thanking the school board for all their work so far in protecting our students. It's been incredible. My name is Anish Wartner, and I'm a member of the class of 2019 of Glenbrook South. Like almost everyone here to deliver a public comment, I'm here to speak with you about masking in the district. While the concept of a simple piece of cloth being enough to save lives should be reason enough to firmly stand with the principle of requiring masks while still in an active pandemic. We are all still here today. My sister is a current freshman at Glenbrook South, and she loves her mask. She loves how she can go to school less afraid of a virus that has claimed almost 1 million American lives. She loves being able to walk into her school and see her friends, go to class together, attend a club, see a play, take a walk. Mask or no mask, that experience is always valuable. Without masking, we must fall back on one of the other two main safeguards we have against the spread of illness: vaccination and social distancing. Our rates of vaccination are not nearly where they could be to make many students feel safe attending, especially for those who cannot get vaccinated and rely on herd immunity. And as you, the school board members, know, and those in the community, as Parker touched on, the Glenbrooks are low on space, to say the least, in the hallways. The only way we could distance feasibly would be remote learning. I know that for most, including myself, the aspect of such socialization is something that nobody wants. Facing the different options, we can see 3 clear paths: masking and being in person, remote learning, or a maskless school. As a school board, you must look out for the public health of this community above all else. So based on physical health, you cannot have a maskless school with such high transmission with an active pandemic. For mental health, it makes more sense to keep people in person. To preserve both of those forms of health, we must have one option that makes sense, and that one is to keep masking. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. I now call Niamh, I think I said that right, Wartner.
Yeah, hello, I'm Niamh Wartner, and yeah, you get to practice twice.
I'm still working.
So I am a graduate of Glenbrook South. I graduated in 2016, and I'm currently working as a medical researcher. School board, the responsibility for both education and protection of students is on the school board. Ensuring that we can minimize deaths in the community is a top moral priority for any institution in the community, one of which is a school. Legally, the school board is bound by the laws of the state of Illinois, and that includes regulations that require precautions against communicable diseases, not just COVID, but tons of other things that we deal with all the time: flu, measles, etc. Anytime the school board fails to protect all of the students, it lets down those students and it fails to protect them from negative outside influences. And at this time, that includes COVID and COVID misinformation that can put their life and the lives of others that they care about in jeopardy. The school board therefore has a moral responsibility to be very careful in making sure that its policies value the right things, not just immediately jumping onto an ill-formed line of thinking. I am almost certain none of us in this room have the credentials or training to be able to make good judgments, expert level judgments on the reality of microbiology and epidemiology that are at play in the COVID pandemic. And if I'm wrong, then I would appreciate being corrected. But it is important to listen to the experts and additionally verify that those are the right experts to listen to. Not just a random doctor, random scientist with an opinion, but someone who has actual background information, actual expertise. No one here, including the school board, has the acumen needed to make conclusions from microbiological information beyond listening to the appropriate scientific guidance from those who have the experience to know it. You need to listen to the people who are actually able to read scientific literature and think, not just anyone who believes knowing English is enough. We are still in an active pandemic, and if we cannot rely on individual citizens to take the precautions needed to preserve life in the face of this kind of challenge, then we need institutions to step in and override the kind of ignorance that causes nations to lose and civilizations to die. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, invite Dan Walsh to the podium.
Good evening, board members. I'm here because I think I have to be. First of all, I want to say thank you for the great work that y'all do. I think GBN my son is a junior here. I think it's a great school. I want to say the staff, teachers always get back to me. If I send them an email, not that I have to send a lot with this kid, but they get right back to me, and I really appreciate that, and explain things to me that I don't understand from, it was a long time ago that I was in high school. But I'm here because I think I have to be, because I have to say that I want you to continue with the masking in the schools. And the only reason I say that is that I think we might get to a point where eventually this can be taken off and we can get to back to a normal. But at this point, just to kind of jump on the bandwagon because of some circuit court opinion down in Springfield, I think it's unwise. I'm not gonna, everybody has their own opinion and this is probably tearing up the community. Neighbors don't get mad at each other and they watch too much TV, and I probably do the same thing. But all I can say is this, I really appreciate that. I know that you guys have the safety and the health of our children and your staff, your teachers and the people working your school at heart. And I just hope you continue to do that. And I hope we do get back to normal. So thank you very much for all the hard work you do.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I am now going to call Marissa Dashnaw. Did I get that right? Hope.
Is this too close? Is this good?
We can hear you. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Hello, my name is Marisol. I'm a senior at GBS and I have a neurological disability. I speak today on behalf of students like me who need mask mandates to be safe. Some people with disabilities need to wear masks as they have pre-existing medical issues. Others have disabilities that prevent them from safely wearing masks. For those that cannot medically wear masks, they are entitled to accommodations to not wear them. However, a mandate that others wear masks is essential to keep them safe. According to an NPR article written in the summer of 2021, lawsuits have been filed against states that have taken away mask mandates in schools by parents whose children cannot wear masks. Their children rely on the education they receive at school to learn essential life skills surrounded by the professionals who they work with on a regular basis. They are arguing that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, mandating that other students wear masks is a reasonable accommodation that their children need to ensure their safety. Students with disabilities should not be forced to choose, between their health and their education. The higher susceptibility that people with disabilities have to serious injury or death from COVID does not lessen their value. Our lives with disabilities and our education matter, and we will fight for it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to next call Brian Schuster.
I just wanted to start with saying thanks, guys, for doing everything you guys are doing. I think it's a challenging time, and I think you've done a commendable job. So my wife and I have a daughter that goes to Glenbrook North. I think a lot of people look at the mask mandate as is the child going to die? And obviously, yes, I think it's unlikely that the child is going to die if they catch COVID. However, I think what the real picture is that what are the other elements that come with catching COVID? There's been multiple studies that show there's about 160% increased chance of getting diabetes if you had caught COVID. So while we may not die, you may have other ailments which are life altering. And so diabetes is one. There's also long-term COVID, right, which affects the students' ability to continue to study. There's other hard elements as well. So there is not just life, death. It's a very simple way to look at it. There's other elements that affect the child, and obviously, I think the well-being of the child is the most important thing. And obviously, mask mandates prevent those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. Lauren Schuster.
I reiterate, thank you so much for everything you're doing for our students. My daughter would love to be here to speak tonight. Unfortunately, given that we have heard about some of the intimidation tactics, I did not feel comfortable with her coming to speak her mind. And that says something about our community, not about the board at all, but about something of us as adults and how we should behave. I work at a district that had to shut down for a week in January. There were not enough teachers who were healthy to go remote. They waited too long. I don't want that to happen to our kids. My daughter loves going to school. She loves interacting with her peers and her teachers. The reason we're able to do that is because of the mask mandate. Science says so. As soon as the CDC says lift the mask mandate, by all means, listen to them. But until the experts in the field say that it is time, it doesn't matter what any of us as parents say. We need to show our students that we are listening to the experts, just as we expect them to whenever they are doing research. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schuster. Next call, Heather Cartwright.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Cartwright, as he just introduced me, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. Like many others have said, thank you so much for everything that you have done and you continue to do to keep our kids safe and to continue the in-person learning experience as much as possible. It's been kind of shocking for me to hear the things that people have said, and I know that you probably get a lot of hate mail. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I currently have an 8th grader at Springman who will be here next year and a 2nd grader at Lyon. So I'm going to be in the district for quite a while. I chose to speak tonight because I honestly remain completely baffled that this is the issue that people are so focused on when public schools in America are facing so many other substantially more important issues than whether or not their children wear masks to keep the community safe. Like many others have said before I came up here, thank you for following the science and listening to the experts. I do think that removing the mask mandate is inevitable. And I think in time, that's the right decision to make, but it's something that needs to be done because the people who know what they're talking about say that it's the right thing to do. Finally, please do whatever you can to support your teachers right now, because hearing a lot of some of the people even in this room that have spoken tonight and the things that people tend to say about teachers. I heard someone earlier today when I was listening to something talk about how they were, you know, teachers were going to be sued, and I'm a teacher, by the way, but teachers were going to be sued and we're going to be held liable for everything that's going on. And it's honestly, it's so demoralizing and hard to listen to. And finally, thank you so much for all that you do. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cartwright. I call Liz McLaughlin to the podium.
Hi, hello, everybody. I am a member of the community with a child in District 34. I'm here tonight as I think other districts are watching the decisions that are made tonight. And the decisions made tonight can influence what happens in District 34. My son, he was born with a heart condition. He's been bullied in the past for wearing glasses. And I fear that if we take off the mask or make it mask optional for some, he may get bullied more. He actually got bullied for wearing 2 masks at the beginning of Omicron. I allowed him to take it off. I know you as a board member have been put in a tough position on how hard you've worked to keep the students, the staff of the schools and the community safe. And I worry sometimes that you don't hear the voices of many of us moderates in the community. Oftentimes it is the loudest members who shout, or the loudest people who shout the loudest and come here. And this is why I'm holding this sign. I am calling on the community to continue to make decisions based on pragmatism and not driven by politics. I am here to offer an opinion offered by many in our community, the opinion of moderates. I am pro-public health. My hope is that we can eventually return to more normal and take off our masks. I do, however, hope that any decision to do so is backed by science and the experts in the scientific and medical communities, peer-reviewed experts that multiple people, not just one-off articles. So my request is please continue to listen to the experts. And let's keep our teachers safe and the schools open, because that really has made a difference to my son in letting him go in every day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Now going to call Mark WireMullen, I think it is.
Well, Mark WireMullen, I'm starting my clock here, so I'll stay the exact 2 minutes.
I'm sorry,
And
sir,
I'm,
sir, I need you to put on your mask.
Should I stop my clock? I can't, Presidents Biden and JB Pritzker both speak without a mask. Can I, and I do have an exemption. Will you allow me to speak? And
I'm
please,
sorry,
I'm
it's
not
the
going to
rule we
interrupt
have
you
to
when you
follow.
speak.
I'm sorry,
Right.
sir, it's the rule. You need to keep your mask on.
I have an exemption. I mean, I don't want to go into the whole thing about explaining to you. I don't even know you guys. And I don't want to explain my medical situation. And I thought I'd be allowed to speak. Can I restart my clock? I'm at
No, you
38
can stop your
seconds
clock
now.
for a second if you could just maybe 1 moment.
I mean, I'm at 41 seconds and I'm 2 lines into my speech.
Sir, we'll start your clock again. Don't worry.
I'm
Don't
sorry.
don't worry about your clock for the moment. Okay, we'll come.
Well, I'm nervous because you're telling me I can't speak. I'm ready to speak.
We need to have you put on your mask, sir. We
I
have to follow the
I
rule.
can't speak with my mask on. I can't articulate. I have a medical, but you're not going to honor medical and
No, if you have a
religious
medical
exemptions?
exemption, okay, that's
I mean,
fine, sir.
I
We'll
mean,
take
I'm
you- we'll take your
embarrassed.
word.
It's humiliating for me. So, okay, can I reset my clock?
Just start again. Go ahead,
I'm
sir.
resetting to 2 minutes. I'm
You're gonna
sorry.
let him speak without a mask.
Okay,
Well, he's got a medical
now
exemption.
he's interrupting me. I mean,
do
you
we
guys
know?
are rude.
How do we know?
Do I get to speak or not? Do I get to speak? Who's this? Are you the mask police? Can I speak or not?
We'll let you speak. Just 1 moment, please. Mr. Taub, did you have a question?
Is he in charge?
Okay. So
Are you
what
in
was,
charge?
no, Mr.
I'm
Taub,
speaking
Are
as
you in
public
charge?
comment.
Are you
You
in
said,
charge?
you said at the beginning of the
Are
meeting,
you in
you would not be
charge?
rude to people.
Enough.
Are you in charge?
Mr. Taub, Mr. Taub.
We should remove him. I mean, this is
Mr.
rude.
We'll start your 2 minutes now, sir.
I'm,
Okay?
This is not what you promised. You said if they don't wear a mask, they can't speak.
I have a mask. I could wear the mask on my head if you want. I mean, it's just,
You can wear your mask on your fucking balls.
Okay,
You don't wear the
enough,
fucking
enough,
mask.
enough.
Get the fuck out of here.
Enough. We're gonna take recess for 5 minutes. Please. We'll take
Get him
a
the
5
fuck
minute
out of
recess.
the room if he can't put his fucking mask on.
Mr. Taub, please. I called recess in 5 minutes. We're taking a recess for 5 minutes right now.
again,
That's just fine. Start your 2
Okay.
minutes now.
are we ready? Okay, thank you. Mark WireMullen. That's Mark WireMullen. Hopefully you won't track me down and bully me like you're doing now. I'm promoting mask optional. And I don't like having to wear a mask. It's very uncomfortable. I'm very embarrassed being here. I'm embarrassed for the board. This is humiliating. I can't believe, I speak at a lot of board meetings. I've never had anything that happened like this before. So let me tell you a few things. The order right now is null and void. It's null and void. You possibly could be in violation of the law now. And I'm just saying, I don't know what your legal counsel is saying, but you should be looking at this. A lot of schools are doing mask optional. Winnetka, Loyola. I don't know why you guys are holding so tight, but there's a temporary restraining order. You guys are aware of this. We could just do it. We could do mask on, mask off as a plan. There's chaos right now. You can see the chaos. The way you guys are acting towards a regular person in the community. I don't understand it. So with teachers, and you see the situation with me. You guys are ready to have me arrested. You want to take me in the hall. Is this what's happening to students out in here? A student doesn't wear a mask. They take him out in the hallway. They send him home. They bully him. This is terrible. I ask that you guys vote tonight to take a vote. I'd like to see you on the record. I want to see who's voting mask optional, who's voting that. So that's one request I have. Take a vote. If you can't do it tonight, let's do an emergency meeting tomorrow. Just have a vote, mask on, mask off, mask optional, because there is a risk with people promoting this. And there's going to be I don't want to say I'm threatening, but there's going to be a push because people want the option. Parents want to make the choice. It's not up to you guys to decide who gets to wear the mask and not. Let's see, I got 9 more seconds. I guess I'll just finish with mask optional and let's see, I got 3 more seconds. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, sir. Call Jeff Kaminsky to the podium. Jeff Kaminsky.
Tough act to follow. Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you and especially the teachers and staff who show up day in and day out to teach our kids. I'm sorry you guys are in the middle of this mess. I'm sorry that this has torn up this community. I grew up in the south suburbs. I was bullied by my classmates for my religion. I was bullied and I was scared and afraid and nobody did a damn thing. I went to the teacher. I was called a kike and nobody did a damn thing. The principal didn't stop it. Nobody stopped it. The school board did not have the courage to do a damn thing. I was 13 years old. And finally, my father said to me, son, sometimes you must take matters into your own hands. And this is one of those times. After months of being bullied, he took me into the backyard and he showed me how to defend myself. He showed me that I would never let somebody knock me down. And that day, when I fought back, I stood up, I grew up, and I never will allow myself or my loved ones to be bullied again. For 2 years, this community has lived in fear. We've all suffered, every one of us. The toll has taken on so many unimaginable. The healthy, the sick, we've all lost. Our children have been robbed of their youth, and the time has come to follow the science, to follow the CDC, and to follow the mandate of lifting the mandate. My children are being bullied by being in school. They're being bullied while their children are telling them, the teachers are telling them, you cannot be in school without a mask. On Friday, one of your students was physically assaulted and the administration did nothing.
Mr. Kaminsky, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to
The administration did nothing. The police were called and they looked the other way. It's not right. It's not fair. It is wrong and it is shameful of this board.
Mr. Kaminsky, I'm sorry, you're going to have to
It
conclude
is
now.
shameful and a dereliction of your basic duty and responsibility to our children. The students don't have the
Mr.
knowledge or
Kaminsky.
confidence to stand up.
Mr. Kaminsky, I
These
need to-
kids need to play sports and need to be who they want to be. It's shameful and a dereliction of your basic responsibility.
Please
Follow the
conclude.
CDC, follow the science.
Conclude now, please.
I beg you to stop tearing this.
Go ahead. I next call to the podium Hannah Horwood, I think it is. I'm sorry, mine is terrible too. I apologize, sir.
Sorry about that.
Horwood, Norwood? What'd you say?
Norwood.
Norwood, I'm sorry,
Henry
sir.
Norwood.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All I can say is, wow, we've had some really talented young speakers out there, and I can only imagine what they're going to do with their lives down the road. I've got, I have a 2020 graduate from GBS, and I have 3 family members at home affiliated with District 225. I want to thank you all for keeping them safe. My primary reason here is a word of thanks, and it was just expressed a little bit ago as well. I think the administration and the faculty have done a fantastic job in a really, really challenging time. There's no question it's difficult for everybody, and a great word of thanks goes to all of them and to you for keeping them safe and keeping them flourishing. I think it'd be wonderful if we get to a point where we can remove masks. I think we should follow the science. I think we should follow the experts. And I look forward to that. And I'd encourage you to see if we can't work toward adopting some metrics to identify when that might be possible. I know that's challenging for you guys as well. I understand that. I do share concerns, just like one of the young speakers expressed a little bit earlier, with respect to spring break. And the fact that we do have travel coming up for a large number of families and what the impact potentially will be down the road. But again, my word of thanks to you, the faculty and the administration at D225.
Thank you, Mr. Norwood. I do see a name for Mr. Kaminsky again. If it's the same, if there's a separate Jeff Kaminsky, it's fine. If not, we're going to skip to the next one. I call then Aaron Wilkins to the podium.
I'll be very brief. Most things have been said. Thank you to the board. Thank you to the administrators at District 225. Thank you to everybody who spoke. I'd just like to express my support for continuing the mandate for now. As everybody has said, we are all over and done with it. It just doesn't feel like it's time yet, but that's not up to me to say. Again, I know that you guys will follow the right advice in determining when it is the right time. I do think, in terms of a community and this talk about it being split apart, we're in pretty good shape here. We don't have a whole lot to worry about. And outside of all of this, there's a whole lot that we can talk about. As an example, for our young people, we need to do better in how we talk about all of this. We've made a ton of mistakes. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but the young student who started, there's been a lot of stigma around not getting the vaccine. I'm pro-vaccine and I'm vaccinated, but there has been stigma through all of this. We've all made a lot of mistakes, and we'll have to apologize for some of that in the end. But I do believe that for the time being, it is prudent to keep things in place. And I think it's also really smart for all of us to find a way to talk to one another, not like we've really been doing tonight. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Amy Abrams. Is perhaps Ms. Abrams in the other room?
In the other room.
Would somebody please? Thank you, officer.
Good evening to the board, and thank you as always for your service. We are all here for the same reason. The bottom line is that we all want masks off our kids. The question isn't, do we want them off? The question is, when do we take them off? As we ponder that question, I want to read you the following. A Tucson high school is mourning after its assistant principal unexpectedly passed away this past Tuesday. In a letter sent out to the community by the principal, Pueblo High School announced that assistant principal David Montaño passed away. He was loved unanimously by everyone, students, family, faculty, and staff. It's a devastating loss, said the principal. There are people in every school that you just can't replace, and that's him. Dave was my friend. He was both vaccinated and boosted, but cancer treatments 2 years ago left him with a manageable heart condition, but not manageable through COVID. He died of COVID after a 10-day illness with it just last week. As you ponder the two passionate sides to this argument of whether to mask or unmask at District 225, I ask you, whose life is expendable here? Whose life is so trivial that it is less important than the minor inconvenience of wearing a mask just a little bit longer? Is it a student? Is it someone on the faculty? Is it someone in this room? Your decision to mask versus unmask cannot come down to who is the loudest, who claps the loudest, or what the latest comment was by a politician. I implore you to follow the science, the very science that says we need to keep masking. If we had vaccination rates like Denmark, with 81% of their population fully vaccinated, as they have lifted all restrictions in Denmark, we could be having a very different conversation. But since we cannot get everyone eligible to get vaccinated, we need to rely on masks for the time being. Thank you again for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. Scott Steele. Have we found Mr. Steele? Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Scott Steele. I'll keep this short. I do want to commend the board for actually having a physical in-person meeting, unlike the cowards in District 34 that went virtual for tomorrow. For 2 years, I've been asking the board repeatedly via email to provide data for the decisions that you're making. And for 2 years, I've heard nothing but crickets. So I figured I'd do a little bit of research and try to do your job for you. I went on the New York Times database and looked at all the Midwest states, the case rates for the last 6 months. I pulled 9 states: Wisconsin, Indiana, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan, Missouri, and Ohio. Illinois had the 4th highest case rate of those 9 Midwest states. How is Illinois different than those other states? It has a mask mandate in schools. So riddle me this. How does Illinois have the 4th highest case rate of those 9 Midwest states and they're the only ones with the mask mandate? Is there some kind of wall on the border that prevents the virus from escaping Illinois? It's common sense. The data is right in front of your face, and yet you refuse to, and you just hide behind public health authorities who've been wrong at every turn. It's just unthinkable how you can't look at the actual data and look at the fact that these states surrounding Illinois don't have mask mandates in school and have the same, if not better, mostly better COVID results in Illinois. I mean, I'll leave it at that. It's just unthinkable that you can't see that information in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. We'll next call Michelle Mayer. And just so we're aware, Andrea Schreiber is going to be following Ms. Mayer. Michelle Mayer, M-A-E-R, and then Andrea Schreiber is going to follow her. if they're over in the overflow room.
Thank you for having me and thank you all to the board for all that you do. My name is Michelle Mayer. I have a student at GBN and I have 2 more in tow coming soon. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all that you've done to help create a healthy and safe learning environment for our kids. I realize how difficult that challenge has been. So I'm here simply to say that I hope the school board will continue to set the example by enforcing proper wearing of masks and by keeping the mask mandate in school until there is a plan in place that follows health and safety measures outlined by experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Next up is Andrea, I believe it's Schreiber, and then Ms. Schreiber will be followed by Glenn Farkas.
Hi, I'm Andrea Schreiber. Thank you for letting me speak. I have 2 kids in the 225 district, and quite honestly, I'm disappointed in what I'm seeing. Masks do not work. They're a joke. I have sent a list of research links directly to the schools about how they do not work, and in fact, are dangerous to wear for long periods of time. It is disgusting and inhumane to watch the schools enforce them on our children. For all the doctors that feel otherwise, there are other doctors that disagree. There are teachers calling them chin straps. The halls are packed like sardines, and so many of them with chin straps. It's a joke. For those terrified to get a virus, by all means, wear a mask. Do what you think will do to you that you need to do to protect yourself. For those that choose to expose themselves to viruses and, God forbid, improve their immune systems, let them have their civil rights to do so. Because after all, if the masks work and you wear them, you will be protected, right? Let us choose what is right for us and what is healthy for us. The science that is being thrown around today, the statistics thrown around today, for me is a joke as well. For all your statistics, there are statistics that say otherwise. It's time to use logic since science has become unreliable. I never thought that the day would come when I would need to defend my child against how a teacher treats them over these masks. It means something is wrong. Teachers are bullying kids over masks. Somewhere the district has lost their way and diverted their attention from teaching kids to spending time on patrolling and scolding kids on masks, sending them to detention or to the dean's office if a mask slips below their nose. Have you watched the athletes? Have you seen the halls? It's a joke. Get back to education and stop playing science that has no consistent background and when there is research to say otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiber. Next, going to call Glenn Farkas, and Mr. Farkas will be followed by Jeff Gundry, I think it is.
Guys having fun tonight?
Good,
It looks like it. We're about to have some more. While we've heard some impassioned speeches on both sides of the mask argument tonight, I want to remind everybody this fight is not just about wearing a piece of cloth on our children's faces. District 225 has been sick for several years, well before the onset of COVID. No mask or vaccine is going to cure the toxic brew of hyperpartisanship, arrogance, bullying, and indifference being promulgated by teachers, administrators, even a few members of this board. The anxiety and emotion that you're witnessing this evening is not part of the disease, but just a symptom of the underlying cancer that's eating away at our schools and community. This is not just about masks. Following the TRO and the law would be a welcome surprise, but it will only act as a Band-Aid on the district's severed arm.
Mr. Farkas, I'm going to have to ask you to put your mask up, please. Thank you.
GCAN leaders worked for several months to deliver you on a silver platter the disgusting truth about Lauren Fagel, but removing Lauren isn't enough. Her sycophants on the administrative council still remain in place and unpunished. Teachers throughout the district continue to push their political and personal ideologies in the classroom, bullying and intimidating students who don't fall in line with their beliefs. Joel Taub continues to shoot his mouth off on social media, repeatedly exposing his insanity and political partisanship. He's truly an embarrassment. Marcelo, you refuse to acknowledge or retract your disgraceful comments comparing unvaccinated students to knife-wielding assailants. Bruce and Charles, neither one of you have had the decency to respond to simple, direct questions in my emails to you. This is not just about masks. And for all those people who are here, who are on the other side of this argument, I ask, everything you say could be true. If it not were for the 42 other states in this country who are optional, for the states that are around Illinois that the man who just spoke talked to you about. It is right in front of your face. And I think his name was Scott. Scott asked you a question. Why can't you see this? I got one more sentence. Why can't you see this? You know what it is? It's typical North Shore elitist groupthink. You think you're smarter than everybody else. Look around this state. There are many schools going mask optional. Kids are not dropping dead. Teachers are not dropping dead. You are not smarter
Thank
than
you, Mr.
everybody
Farkas.
else.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We next call Jeff Gundry, and he will be followed by Tracy Slutsky.
Yeah, that's Jeff Gundrum for the record. Okay,
Sorry, I couldn't read it.
that's all right.
Gundrum, Mr. Gundrum. I'm sorry.
What a community, man. I love this stuff. This is really good stuff. You know, listen, if I've been given two choices, fear and freedom, I take freedom every time. Every time. If you guys came to me and said, you're going to inject me with the virus, or I can accept communism, inject me with the virus every time. This is about power, not science, okay? And the power of the people that want to be free from this mask is rising in this community. You know, I grew up in Wisconsin, and they don't even believe this stuff is going on down here. They think I'm joking because they live in freedom, because people in Wisconsin wouldn't take this crap, okay? And I ain't gonna take it anymore, okay? End it. Johns Hopkins University said the mandates and the lockdowns don't work. Don't work. If you call Medline, who sells protective gear all over the United States, these masks that I'm wearing, they don't work. They don't work, okay? And in August, when I was here, I told you the vaccines don't work. You know why? Because see, I'm a Wall Street guy. I actually get the data, okay? My guys at Pfizer told me it didn't work. Even Bill Gates says it doesn't work. So what are we doing? What are we doing? It's power that you don't have. Thank you.
Now call Tracy Slutsky. And Ms. Slutsky will be followed by James Williams. Ms. Slutsky's here. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you to the board for allowing all of us to speak. I know it's a long night, and I appreciate your adherence to mask mandates. I want to talk a little bit about the hospitals and healthcare workers. Our hospitals, there's still about 2,000 people a day across the country who are dying from COVID. Our hospitals are filling up. Our healthcare workers are burnt out. It's not really only about COVID. It's also about all the other people who need medical attention who are not able to get help because of the hospital situation, because they are crowded, because there still are a sizable number of people in the hospitals in the healthcare space who are not able to get attention, who are still getting COVID. And I think that a lot of people have said, we want to get rid of the masks. We want to eventually lift the mandate, but it's too soon. Let's wait. Let's see how this new trend, I know that we're in a state of decline right now, how it plays out, and then we can make a more informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Slutsky. Next up is James Williams, and Mr. Williams, followed by Agatha Mitchell, I think it is. Oh, Agatha Mitchell's the second one. The first one is James Williams.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Williams. I live at 1827 Sunnyside Circle here in Northbrook, Illinois, in the district. And for the past 7 years, I have been an active volunteer at Glenbrook North, working alongside parents with the Glenbrook North Booster Club and the Glenbrook North Choir and Theater Patrons Association. Now, many of the comments today have either been for or against a specific side of mask mandates, and I am not here to either say for or against them. Rather, I am going to share comments similar to what someone else talked about regarding a moderate side, but in this case, I'm speaking here to point out that regardless of whatever science, in my opinion, is shared regarding masks or vaccinations, most of that science was based on studies with non-disabled people and people who are part of usually a non-disabled majority. There are people with disabilities, no matter what science says, that really medically have issues with wearing masks and medically are going to have issues with vaccinations. Some people can't be masked, some people can't be vaccinated. And even before the pandemic, there have always been health mandates and health rules that have disqualified people with disabilities from full participation in society and parts of school because of conditions that made them unable to follow certain rules that they didn't ask to be born with. I am only here to say this. Whatever ruling is made today, whatever mandates are, all mandates disqualify some people with disabilities from participation. The question is, what accommodations are we willing to give to help people with disabilities and students who are disqualified from whatever exists in school? What accommodations are we willing to give them with whatever mandates are passed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Now we call Agatha Mitchell, and Ms. Mitchell will be followed by Kelly Ballerini.
Good evening. I'm a mom of a freshman at GBN. We do have a pandemic, but it's a pandemic of lawlessness. You are, of course, aware of Judge Grishaw's ruling, but let me reinforce some of the points she made, because I think she's kind of an expert, right? If we talk about law, I would say she's kind of an expert. And also because I don't think that many people took time to read the 29 pages that her ruling took. I shared them with you in the email, but I didn't get any reply, so I thought it makes sense to come here and share them. The emergency mask mandate and guidance from the governor, IDPH and ESB avoid. These are the mandates and guidance that you have been following. No authority exists under the law to mandate masks in our schools for children or for staff without due process. Let me enforce that, without due process. You sent a note to parents that District 225 was not listed on the lawsuit and therefore the ruling did not apply to the district. Well, the ruling made it clear that the mandates by the governor and these agencies were deemed unlawful for the named students. Well, if they're unlawful for the named students, how can they be not unlawful for all the students? The judge stated, quote, non-named plaintiffs and school districts throughout the state may govern themselves accordingly. I'm sure she didn't mean continue following unlawful mandates. Another powerful statement that the judge made and made headlines, quote, it is clear IDPH and ESB were attempting to force local schools district to comply with these guidance without any compliance with rulemaking. This type of evil is exactly what the law was intended to constrain, unquote. It is past time for the board to respect every child's right to due process before masking, exclusion, and testing can be required. If District 225 chooses to continue the mask mandates, vaccination requirements for staff, and close contact quarantine without a due process, you are potentially exposing yourselves to significant liability. I am really not interested in your conjectures or opinion. I expect the board and staff and parents to simply follow the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Kelly Ballerini, and after that will be Paul Kelly.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Ballerini, and I have 2 children here at GBS. I'm here advocating for option for all of our children, but tonight I'm going to be a voice for the students who don't have one. My cousin has a daughter in the school system who was diagnosed at birth with epilepsy. She's also born nonverbal. I sat down with her last week to discuss how the past 2 years have affected her family and the students with special needs. She asked me to share her story here with you tonight. The last day Caroline went to school was March 11th, 2020, almost 2 years ago. She was happy. She was part of the community. She was thriving despite her condition. When COVID hit, I knew she could never tolerate a mask, so we pivoted to full-time therapy. She is in great hands and loved by her therapists, but she is isolated to one room with one adult for almost 2 years. The mask mandate has essentially turned my daughter into a ghost who gets carted around to different places outside a school setting where she won't bother people with her maskless face. She is not allowed to participate in Park District programming, visit the Children's Museum, attend her brother's basketball games, invited to parties, or go out to dinner with her family. Her only interaction with peers was at school, and that has been taken from her. I cry every single night hoping this nightmare will end and that my child will once again be able to socialize with other students. I am pleading with anyone who is in any position to make a change to please make schools mask optional. Please remember those students that society has left behind. I will leave off with one last thought. People say to me, aren't you glad the masks protect vulnerable children like Caroline? What I want to respond to them is, you're actually killing her little by little every day. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story.
Thank you, Niamh. Next is Paul Kelly. And he'll be followed by Melissa Jacobson.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paul Kelly. It's a tough act to follow. Got a lot of my good lines already taken. When the decision came down for Sangamon County, that was the opportunity for this board and for this school district and every school district to make the right decision for the kids. And a lot of them did, okay? At this point now, all due respect, you guys own this. You own it. It's not the governor, it's not anybody else. You guys own this. And what you're doing, you say you follow the law, it's illegal. It is illegal what you are doing, okay? Let me tell you this, if you get COVID, if I get COVID, if anybody gets COVID, you know whose fault it is? Guess whose fault it is? Nobody's. Doesn't matter if you're in school, if you go to a store, if you go anywhere, whether or not they're wearing masks or not, you can transmit it. Whether or not you are vaccinated or not, you can transmit it. All these measures you're putting in place, you do not blame other people for your health. It is not their fault. Don't punish them, okay? I reiterate what Mr. Steele said earlier. You look around the states, look at every single surrounding state. You want to say to follow the science? Science doesn't mean anything anymore. People will say follow the science. What does that mean? Right? If you look at the data, if you truly look at the data, it's ridiculous. It's a joke. Masks don't prevent it. Vaccinations don't prevent the spread. States who have not had these measures in place do not have increasing rates. And the people who say, all due respect, that they want, hey, it's too soon. Notice what they didn't say. Didn't say when. It's just too soon. It's just too soon. Wait, it's just too soon. And you know what? That's what they said a year ago. That's what they said 6 months ago. Didn't say when. It's just whenever they feel like it. Okay? So when they feel like it. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
All right. Thank you.
We next call Melissa Jacobson, and Ms. Jacobson is going to be followed by Michelle Zernick.
Good evening. We have a lot of passion in the room tonight, and I hope that means that we have a community that really cares about our children. My name is Melissa Jacobson, and I'm a parent of a GBN freshman and a recent graduate, as well as a wife of an alum. I'm here because I'm very concerned about a crisis that we have in our district. No, this is not the crisis of the pandemic. It is instead a crisis from the measures we have put in place as a result of this pandemic. It is a crisis of mental health in our children. An analysis of 29 studies published by reputable organizations such as JAMA, AAP, CDC, HHS have revealed some troubling statistics. 20 to 25% of our school-aged children are newly experiencing depressive and anxiety symptoms. Eating disorder hospitalizations have increased 120%. Hospital visits from suspected suicide attempts has increased 51% in adolescent girls and 40% across all children ages 12 to 17. Unfortunately, our GBN family has felt the agonizing pain of death by suicide as we lost a beloved senior last year. I held my then senior son, who was a friend of Dylan's, in my arms as he sobbed uncontrollably and said, "Mom, he just wanted to play football," as that was his outlet. That is what kept him going. Subsequently, Dylan's parents have made similar comments that the pandemic restrictions were a key factor. While it's beautiful how our community has surrounded Dylan's family to offer support, I urge you to do everything you can to make sure this doesn't happen again. While we need to take steps to protect our community from COVID, we cannot put the COVID health over the overall health of the whole person. Protecting the mental, social, and emotional health of students should be our top priority. What we have learned over the last 2 years of this pandemic is that COVID, while deadly to the elderly and sick, it has mostly spared our children. The incident of pediatric mortality from COVID is on the order of magnitude of influenza. In fact, the flu
Ms.
season
Jacobson, I'm sorry, I have
of
to ask you to
2012,
wrap up.
2013 was twice as deadly as COVID.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson.
Remove the masks, free our children, restore their mental health.
And next call, Michelle Zernick, and Ms. Zernick will be followed by Jeff Gallenbeck.
Hello, my name is Michelle Zernick. I have a graduate from last year who's in college in Florida. And this is my son, Ethan Zernick, who is in the transition program under the umbrella of 225. And I would have him speak for you, but the last 2 years has robbed him of his verbal ability. We're just getting back to sort of utterances and words and some reading. But when this all started, he was making comments, answering questions, interacting with his typical peers, and he was sort of a man about town at GBN, which is a lovely school, quite inclusive. And, you know, we feel like the rug got pulled out from under us. We all got vaccinated. Ethan was vaccinated as soon as he could be, to get him back into sort of a normal community, interacting with people. And being forced to wear the mask all day long, he reacts to it as if it's a physical barrier. He needs to see faces. He needs to be with people who don't fear him, because social inhibitions and fear in the community affected him greatly when he was young. He was scared of children when he was in 3rd grade, and we need to get back to normal. We've been watching closely because this has been so awful, and we keep saying, my husband and I, okay, if by February he can't go to school without a mask, we have to look, we have to leave. We know what it looks like in open states. Case counts are the same, death rates the same. I don't know what to do. Do we move across the border to Wisconsin? What we really want to do is stay in this community and follow the current science, which says that I don't care what other people do with the vaccination, because at this point, we know we are vaccinated. It's to protect ourselves, if you believe that, from serious illness. I don't care if someone's unvaccinated, because it really doesn't seem to stop the spread. So I say back to normal, follow the science on that front. And that's it. I'll end there, but thank you for everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zernick. Next, we have Jeff Gallenbeck, and Mr. Gallenbeck will be followed by Laura Molaka. Laura Molaka. And after Ms. Malaka, we'll have a Julia or Juna Tranis, I think, or James Tranis, I can't read. Okay, Ms. Malaka.
Yes, my name is Laura Malaka. I have a sophomore at GBN, and he also takes Japanese at GBS, and 2 graduates of GBN. And all 3 of my kids have had an awesome experience at GBN. And I'd just like to thank the board for all your hard work. And I'd just like to thank the board to listen to the CDC and to scientists and epidemiologists. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And then I can't tell if it's James or Gina Tranis as the surname.
It's me. Hi, my name is Jana Tranis. I live at the 2900 block of Applegate here in Glenview. I'm an educator. I've dedicated my life to teaching children. The last 3 years, I've been teaching in a preschool, and I can tell you masks are theater. They are not worn correctly by staff or students or grandparents who pick up or nannies who pick up or parents who pick up. My own children wear their masks as chin warmers, under the nose. We are prudent people. You said wear the masks. I'm not you, the CDC. We wore them. Get the vaccine. We got them. Get the boosters. We got it. Stay home. Don't see your elderly parents. I didn't until the last month of my dad's life. And then it was game over. I had to go. If you're not going to listen to the parents, the students, how can you not listen to the courts? We are a nation of laws. It is game over for these masks. We have done what you've asked us to do. People are not, no minds will be changed at this point. The unvaccinated will remain so, and they are at a higher risk. The vaccinated are at a lower risk. It's no different than smoking, no different than driving your car without a seatbelt. This is where we are. The pandemic will never leave us. We live in a COVID world. Please make masks optional. It is not fair for the staff. My school where we teach, not one teacher or aide wants to wear the mask. Not one. And all of our students are under 5 years old, not one's vaccinated. So I think that you really need to keep that in mind, what's going on here. We're not a bunch of complainers. We went through the court system. It's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And in
Ms.
the best of times, a board through altruism leads and leaves the community better. In bad times, you have headaches and grinia complaints. I thank you for your service. It is very difficult to be a public servant. You cannot make everyone happy, but thank you very much for serving.
Thank you, Ms. Tranis. Our final speaker tonight is Rosa Zork, I think it is. I said that right, Zork?
Yes, good evening. My name is Rosa Zork. I have 2 children who are alumni of Glenbrook South, and I have 1 child who will be coming to Glenbrook South. And I wanted to share this with you. At this point, we have masks, social distance, tests, and about 2/3 of the population vaccinated with so-called COVID vaccine, which really is an experimental genetic drug, which we are injecting into our children. And what do we have? 3 times more of infection rate this year. None of this stuff works. It makes it worse. What have we done to our children? We made them physically and mentally ill with all of what we are doing. We would have been dead much better doing nothing. And the chip of mental and physical illness that we caused our children, that's a chip for the rest of their lives. And no, they're not going to be fine. They're not going to be fine. This will be there forever, affecting them. So my question to all of us is this: what kind of humanity are we? Because normal humanity protects their children and doesn't use their children as shields for adults.
We are a sick humanity because we use our children as shields for adults. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment portion of the evening. We appreciate everyone who offered comments this evening and showed up. As always, we take your comments very seriously. We also get a lot of email and other kinds of commentary that come into us, and we take all of that input in very seriously. So thank you for all of your time. There's no question there's a variety of views in our community, as there are across this country. And we take that all into account as we move forward. We've now moved to the board and superintendent reports portion of our meeting. And let me just start by saying and following up on this, and where I started this meeting is we follow the law. And that is a combination of statutes and regulations, executive orders, mandates, and applicable court orders. We are watching very carefully what is happening in the courts, along with our governor in Cook County. At this point, our district, we've announced on February 6th, our position of following the governor's mandate has not changed. We're watching carefully. We know things could shift. We are keeping our in-school proceeding with our in-school learning proceeding activities and athletics are all available. We know these are difficult issues with many, many perspectives, but we want you to know that we really at this point are mandated to follow the law, and we can't do much regarding that beyond that. At some point when we have discretion, we will, as always, exercise it carefully and appropriately. And with that, Andre, Dr. Johns.
Thank you, Mr. Dowdy. Just to add a little bit more to what you just finished saying. I think we're all eager to get to the point where we no longer have to wear masks, and we're eagerly watching the governor's actions and the appellate court. We hope to hear, although there's some confusion on whether or not we will, but we hope to hear an answer from the appellate court as early as Thursday. As many know who are court watchers, you know that unlike the circuit court, the appellate court has authority over the entire state. So that will give us some clarity as we move forward, if we're so fortunate to have the appellate court act on Thursday. Additionally, many people have heard that the governor's recent statement was the metric he is looking at is hospitalizations. And we're grateful to know that in the state of Illinois, and particularly in our area, there is declining hospitalizations. In our data set would be Cook County, and we're seeing a decline in hospitalizations, which is another positive move. We are continuing to watch this very closely. I never thought I'd pick up a kind of a earn your own law school degree as you go, but it seems to be what we've been doing as school superintendents. One thing I can tell you that the leadership of the district anticipates that at some point we'll be in a mask-free environment. It's a matter of when. And we're continuing to work on mitigations that may be available to help those who are uncomfortable or fearful as we move forward, so we can create an environment where people can be comfortable, ideally mask-free when it's healthy to be so, but also a situation where students and staff who feel they need to wear masks to be safe can do so without bullying and rely on the kindness, which is such a part of this community, so that they can attend school or work at school and take measures to keep themselves safe. And that's important to which we're moving on with. One other thing, just as a reminder, I think this is important. Someone mentioned earlier today, spring break is coming. We'd like to see it fast because we're all eager for the better temperatures than what we have right now. But we will have one more round of testing after spring break as a mitigation to help curb a vast spread. We, as someone else said tonight, want to avoid an outbreak by all means. An outbreak impacts our ability to continue to keep our schools open. As we saw earlier this year, it impacted our ability to have enough staff to keep our schools operational. And we want to be on top of that. And we know spring break is a risk factor for us as we move forward. I'll talk more about this in a little bit with the agenda item, but I did want to put some concluding comments on to what you said. Now, with all that said, let's fill the room with some good news. Both the principals are here tonight to give us an update on some of the wonderful things that are happening in the district. Who wants to go first? Should we flip a coin? Oh, Roseanne, thank you. Dr. Williamson.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Johns. And we have some celebrations, but also some celebrations of some things that bring us some normalcy. So I am happy to report that our registration for next school year is winding down. So student services, school counselors have been busy meeting with students to register and choose courses for next year. So that's it's nice to celebrate things that bring us some normalcy. Also, in our student services area, I know we partner with GBN on this. On February 26th, we're hosting a college colloquium that will provide students and parents the opportunity to attend different sessions. This will be held virtually, and we have experts, local and national experts, with information on the college selection process. Also, you may know this week is the GBS V Show. The title of our V Show is You Learn, and that may seem like an odd title, but it's about lessons learned in life. So I know that there's been a lot of that going on the last couple of years. So our ticket sales have been brisk. So we're very much looking forward to a V Show this week. And then next week to follow, I believe we've got our musical audition start next week very quickly after V Show is wrapped up. So the musical this year will be at Glenbrook North. And then just a couple of things to report. Our chess team finished 6th in the state, so they're always very competitive. I think they had some matches that tied that pushed them to 6th. I want to give a shout out to our fencing team, and I'll say Glenbrook fencing. I know we have about 10 students from Glenbrook North participating with our fencing team. And even though it's not an official IHSA sport, the team has placed regularly in competition this season, and they're very proud to have grown to nearly 40 students. So that's quite an accomplishment for our fencing team. I think many people are following boys basketball. No surprise to report that they're looking forward to postseason play. And they're also CSL champions. So Glenbrook South basketball boys looking forward to postseason. And then just a couple of things, girls gymnastics, Talia Skoulakaris placed 13th in sectional. So she qualifies for the state at large for the state meet. And then this past weekend, the wrestling team had an exciting weekend. 3 wrestlers qualified to the IHSA state tournament championship this coming weekend. And our wrestling team has really had an exceptional season as well. And then finally, the boys indoor track and field team opened their season and hosted a 5-team meet on Friday night. And it's the first indoor meet that they've had in nearly 2 years. So celebrating indoor track back after 2 years. And I think that tells us spring sports is just around the corner.
It's great news. Mr. Markey.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Williamson. I think I'll pick up with our IHSA celebrations as well. Much like South, we've had really unprecedented success across the district, and it's a lot to be very proud of. So the last 2 weekends consecutively, we had to this prior weekend, both our POMS competitive dance team and followed by our co-ed cheerleading team at GBN, both participated in the state championships at IHSA. So they advanced through their sectionals and participated at state. So that was exciting. And we also had our own Mr. Chris Cooper was named the IHSA Boys Volleyball Coach of the Year, which is quite an honor of distinction for Coach Cooper. It's well deserved. Of course, if you recall, coming off winning a state championship over the summer. It was when the seasons were adjusted a little bit. So typically a spring sport. So congratulations to Coach Cooper. We also participated in the state chess tournament at GBN and finished in the top 20. I think we were 16th. And we had the IHSA speech sectionals with this past weekend. We had, I believe, 4 or 5 events that finished in the top 5 or 6, and we had 1 state qualifier. So John Bascoma placed 2nd in oratorical declamation, and will be advancing to the state championships for the IHSA speech tournament. Excuse me.
easy for me to say. I didn't qualify in speech. Next, we also, V show is coming up at GBS. Our V show was this past weekend. It was amazing. And I was talking to some of the board members that attended. I'm sure some of you were able to see that as well. And it will be posted, the archive of that video. So if you didn't have a chance, or you want to watch some of the acts again, or try to figure out what David Gustner did in his magic act, you can watch the video of that. It's pretty impressive. And then finally, to bring it all the way around to academics, we had 9 students who qualified to compete in the American Invitational Mathematics Examination. Another event that I did not compete in, so that would take some further explanation if you're interested. But it's pretty amazing accomplishments from our math program, who have just traditionally been very successful and continue to push each other as far as their peers, and some wonderful staff members that support them in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markey, Dr. Williamson, and Dr. Johns. And kudos on the variety show. It was always wonderful to see that. I'm looking forward so much to the South one as well. I think that perhaps someone's spawn was in it during it. So always good to see that as well. Board members, anything you'd like to share? Mr. Shine? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Williamson.
Oh, I have one more. You want
I
to
am
say
so sorry.
Superintendent segment for last, or we can do it now?
You can do it now if you wish, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. I didn't want to.
Thank you, sir. I had a lot of fun the other week, in which I spent some time with the Glenbrook South radio program. It's a program that's it's in its 40th year. It's a 40th anniversary of this program. It started in 1982. And I had a chance to meet with senior Billy Frayden, and I think she's a junior, Yumisi Oladare. 2 very charming, very intelligent young people who really love our radio program. They talk about how it's their place to go to. The rooms down there's a suite of rooms that we have for the radio program, and it's a buzz of activity, of people really having a great time. So Ms. Salonikas, our communications manager, and I spent some time meeting with them, and I was on their radio show, which scares me. And so we put together a quick video introducing or resharing our radio program at GVS.
For Glenbrook South Radio, I'm Billy Frayden alongside Yumisi Oyujare, and this, in brief, a public affairs program addressing issues of importance to the North Shore community.
It was a radio show.
I was just to say, maybe there is no video,
right?
It may work.
Here we go.
For Glenbrook South Radio, I'm Billy Frayden alongside Yumisi Oyujare, and this, in brief, a public affairs program addressing issues of importance to the North Shore community.
Billy, thank you so much for having me today. It's a real honor to join the two of you together today, and to join your audience. I'm noticing the 40-year anniversary. That's incredible sustainability for any program.
What do you think 40 years of student and community participation says about the GBS radio program?
I think it shows the work of students and staff over the years to keep that sense of pride and mission consistent for such a long time.
I think we as a program, both the radio and the film program at Glenbrook South, have become even more important to teaching the contemporary young people the power they have, the importance of being intelligent about it, and give them the skills and tools they need to understand the implications of what they say, what other people say, and the permanence of it.
What do you like best about this?
Honestly, my favorite thing, I think being on air is an awesome opportunity, but I think just like the classroom setting, I think is awesome.
Do you guys find that you kind of gravitate here in your open hours?
Yeah. Yeah. I know, like when I have my SRTs and stuff, I'm often like in the studio, even if like I like just need like a quiet place to work. You know, Doc is amazing, and we'll always like let people come in when they need to.
I think it really demonstrates our district's commitment to maintaining the comprehensive high schools, where students can continue to get involved in organizations, activities, and classes that provide them with unique experiences that they might not have in other parts of their lives.
For Glenbrook South Radio, I'm Billy Frayden with Yemisi Olujare, and this is In Brief.
So as I said, that was really a great deal of fun. And Billy and Yemisi were wonderful radio station hosts. And they treat it very seriously. It's a real radio show and it is transmitted live. According to Doc Oswald, our radio teacher, before the radio studios were actually built at GBN, and mind you, we truly have a suite down there of radio studios. Both the GBN, GBS students would travel to a local community station and they would have to rent out time in order to broadcast their shows. And interesting note, Dr. Oswald has been a part of the GBS radio program since he was a student. And then we hired him as a teacher in 2004. I'm sure it wasn't that long ago, just saying. But he was hired in 2004 to be our radio teacher. And I think it's really great how the kids gave him a shout out in the ways that they're really drawn to him as one of those exceptional teachers that helps kids find things that are really valuable to them. So thank you to the radio program. Thank you, Billy and Yemisi and Dr. Oswald.
That's always great to see. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds us just how broad our program is for our students. Board members, anything you'd like to share at this point? Mr. Schein?
I would like to share that I spent time at both buildings Friday, and I was struck by the normalcy. I'm not certain what I expected. I haven't been in the buildings for a few months. And obviously the topic we spoke on and heard feedback from tonight is challenging, but I didn't feel it in the school. And I spent time at both schools, a long time at North. I had circumnavigated the building with Ms. Bonner, looking at some of the physical plant upgrades that we're going to be going through. And she's heavily involved in those, but it allowed me to take a path through a good part of the school, including the math support area, the English social studies support area, areas where there were lots and lots of students. And there was just serious work going on, but there was just a lot of engagement. And so I guess my message is to take some time and go and walk through the schools, talk to teachers, talk to faculty, administrators. It'll give you a different perspective, I think, than we get. This is more of a passive reception of information. And my kids are obviously long gone from the schools, and it was a little eye-opening for me. So I guess that's it. I would just encourage you, go spend some time. Go in the department, see what's going on. They'll be happy to see you, to show your interest. And kids were fantastic. I just kind of had a cursory side listen to a couple of interactions. And I'll tell you, one student came into the office, so incredibly polite. Miss Bonner was the only one really there. Principals were busy when I was in. And just this kind of level of respect and collegiality. It was really very heartwarming. With all the problems, and not to minimize them, because believe me, this is serious stuff. There's a lot of positive things too. So I just share that.
Thank you for taking the time and sharing that, because there is so much going on. It's positive, and we do hear about it from time to time, but it's that kind of firsthand experience is great. Dr. Steinberg, did you have something you want to share? Oh, okay. Anyone else at this point? Okay, great. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackie.
Being someone who was in the a neighboring school district's broadcast program, we were always jealous of what took place here. And so I remember the first time we got a tour of the facility, we went, oh, we've got tin cans in comparison in spring.
Awesome.
So
are you asking for an opportunity to go to the show?
I think I may, but no, I had an opportunity also to walk the halls this past week at my son's dismay, who tries to keep me out of the schools. But no, it was nice to see the kids pulling together, trying so many things, at least at GBN, between the tournaments, the excitement with the sports and everything happening, and also with his friends over at GBS, kind of a little banter going back and forth about who's going where this week for what state tournaments. So I appreciate everything that the staff are doing, teachers, everyone, to keep us going forward and keeping the kids always first in mind. So thank you.
Excellent. These are wonderful reports to hear. We will move now to, let's see, item, I believe it's 5 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda items. Any adjustments in the consent agenda, Dr.
Yeah, I
Johnson?
just wanted to point out, and it's sitting at the board members' seats, that we have inserted a revised resignation report. We had a late resignation this week, and we'd like to approve it so she can continue on to her next employment.
Okay, excellent. With that adjustment, Mr. Blackie?
So I move that we approve the consent agenda with the revised document that's been provided to all board members.
Second.
Mr. Dowdy?
Yes.
Mr. Glowacki?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hara?
Yes.
Ms. Segwin?
Yes.
Mr. Schein?
Yes.
Dr. Steinberg?
Yes.
Mr. Taub?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Bruce, I'm sorry.
Yes, I guess.
Because we didn't have discussion, and I just have a quick question.
Oh, on the consent. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was okay.
No,
Apologies.
just a side note, and I don't know if we have the answer or not, but we keep reading that in all the districts, we have more resignations and it's harder to keep. How do we do with respect to other districts? Or how are we doing right now?
Quite honestly, I think we're just comparing to ourselves.
Okay.
We're probably about where we were last year and in years before. I'm not seeing, and Mr. Swanson, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not seeing a rash of resignations and whatnot at this time, nor have we over the past couple of months. We are keeping an eye on it. We're very concerned about it. Looking into opportunities for recruiting in case there is some turnover. One of the things I think it's important to remember, working in the Glenbrooks, it's a great district to work in. And it is a place that most educators aspire to come to. So I suspect and anticipate that we'll have less turnover. Doesn't mean that we won't, but I anticipate that we'll have less. And at this point, I haven't seen anything to raise alarm bells in comparison to ourselves a couple of years ago. Good
That's
question,
good.
though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, great. So we're now going to move to what used to be item 9, which is now new item 6, which is the COVID-19 mitigation strategies. I know you've already started talking about this, Dr. Johns. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just want to kind of sum up and catch some of the points that have come up throughout the night and make some clarifications. And we also have our district attorney, Mr. Justin Petrarca, who will be joining us in a little bit via Zoom, because I know there are some questions, particularly about whether or not or how the Sangamon case may apply to jurisdictions outside of Sangamon County. So as RJ is working on that, I'll go ahead and start. And if there's some questions that are beyond my legal expertise, we have Mr. Petrarca to help us out. As I said before, I know we're all very impatient to get to normalcy. And while we're seeing a kind of a rising wave of more and more normalcy coming to us, I know the mask feels like one of the last things that's keeping us from normalcy. I contend that it's not, that there's a lot we have yet to do before we fully reach normalcy. The mask is just something that we all see. I think that there is an opportunity ahead, and I think the governor has signaled it to us that there is going to be some change on the mask mandate. Other than schools, the governor has said that the mask mandate will likely be removed on February 28th. And it's also should be noted that the executive order, which we're now under, Executive Order 2022-05, is set to expire in early March. It expires March 5. And so that would be the date at which we would see some sort of change, likely date, that if we're to see some sort of change from the governor's action in terms of a mask mandate. Many of you probably also heard the press conference when he hinted that after the 28th, maybe within a few weeks, he'll make some decisions at schools. And since then, he's talked about hospitalizations as the metrics, which, as I pointed out before, are coming down. So I think what we're seeing is things are turning in the right direction. And I think it's on our horizon. We simply don't know when. And the administration is working to be prepared for that when it does happen. There's been a lot of debate and conversation, although interestingly, it has died down recently, on the Sangamon court case judge's findings. As we've pointed out very early on in our response after that Friday night ruling, is that that case does not apply to us. We're not in the jurisdiction of the Sangamon County Court. We're not a plaintiff. I'm sorry, we're not a defendant in that court. And the point at which she says the infamous footnote that may apply, that's considered dicta. That's not part of a TRO. It's not part of a ruling. It's not something that applies to us. Also should be noted, it is a TRO. It's a temporary restraining order. It's not her final decision. We now have to go through, if she continues to keep the case, if the appellate court kicks it back to her, she still has to hear the whole case. This is a temporary decision at this point on her part. I've been in conversation with multiple law firms just to triangulate, and I'm hearing those comments that I just made about this court case. Many different law firms are saying the same thing. In fact, I've heard no school law firm say anything but this case does not apply to non-defendants, particularly those outside of Sangamon County. I do think, and as I said earlier, that we should hear something from an appellate court by Thursday. There's speculation on how that may come forward and whether it would come forward. Also want to point out that since we're not under the jurisdiction, since we're not a non-defendant, that the governor's mandate is still in place, and we conferred with CCDPH last Monday to make sure we were still under that mandate. As you'll recall, and was mentioned tonight, we followed the CCDPH this entire time, and the CCDPH still says we are under that mandate. I don't want to go into the lengthy conversation I had back in August, but if you recall, if we intentionally disregard a law, there are liability implications. And those are very serious, and they can play out in different ways. And the biggest way is that we don't have the protections from liability exposure. People can still take us to court, but we don't have the same set of protections that we would if we, uphold the law. The other issue, and we've talked about this briefly in the past, is that the ISBE still has enforcement capabilities, as does the CCDPH. Now, granted, I don't anticipate them coming in with the ISBE squad cars and shutting down our schools. That I'm being facetious, but that's not going to happen. But there are implications for us as professionals. There's implications for us as a board. There's implications of liability of the district and individuals, depending on how we play this out. The best way to protect the district, the board, the administration, the people who work here is to follow the law, because then the law, liability law, is on our side. I anticipate there'll be action soon. As eager as we are to have a mask mandate end, we also don't want our kids to be in a situation where it's on again, off again with masks. There are school districts who are already sweating this. The defendant districts are very worried that on Thursday, the court case may be overturned by the appellate court, and they'll have to return to masks. I contend that's harder for kids. That's harder for kids than wearing a mask, is to have a couple days of freedom from the mask and then have to return to wearing masks again. And finally, this is really important. We're a rule-making organization. We make rules. This body is about to pass a long list of policies that rule how we operate as a district. If we choose to ignore, willingly, publicly, intentionally ignore a law, I contend we lose our integrity. We lose our integrity whenever we ask a student to follow a law or a rule or a policy. How are they going to look at us as role models when they know on a grand stage we looked past the law and chose to disregard it? If we don't like laws, and there are plenty of mandates in education that we don't like, you'll hear me over the years speak poorly of many mandates, but the best way to contend with that is not to ignore it, not to disregard it, but is to do it the right way through our legislative process. And we have great legislators. We have that are actually members of our community that know us, that our kids have been through our organizations. And if we truly want to change laws that we're frustrated with, then that is the right course of action, not willingly and blatantly disregarding the law. As we wait for the governor to change or remove the mandate, the administration is working with different paths. We're calling this an off-ramp. Certainly a mask option environment will be a feature for any and all of our students and staff. I spoke today, I anticipate our future being quite like what I saw in a trip I had to Asia years ago when the MRSA virus was prevalent. people chose to wear masks. Sometimes people wear masks because they had the flu, didn't feel well, worried about the pollution, worried about the virus. But people chose to wear masks, and we have to let everybody, students and staff alike, make those decisions. And we have to do so in a way that prevents people from being bullied for those decisions, because those are health decisions. So those are personal. They're very important. And we want to return to the environment that made this community so strong, in which we look out for each other and we treat each other with kindness. And I hope when we get to the path down the road, wherever it may be, and I'm not speculating on the day that will happen, although I believe it will be soon, is that we treat each other with kindness as we head down that path. And if someone needs to wear a mask, we support them in their mask wearing, whether it be a student or staff member, because we want to keep everybody protected, healthy, and feeling their best at doing the work that they're doing in our community. So those are the words I wanted to say for tonight. We continue the path. We take the direction from our governor and the CCDPH, as frustrating as it may be for many, but we'll watch closely and be prepared to respond as necessary. So thank you.
Dr. Johns, thank you for the excellent summary of so many things are important, not just the legal side, but the practical side, the humanity side, and the fact that we need to keep underscoring how important it is for our community working together and working with respect and civility, because this has been a long path. Our nerves are frayed. It has been difficult for everybody across the world, not just here. And our efforts to heal and come together as we do this are going to be more important than ever. So thank you for those very positive messages, realistic but positive. I know that Mr. Petrarca has joined us. Before I ask the board whether they have any questions, Mr. Petrarca, do you want to add anything to what Dr. John said at this point?
No, I thought that was, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
We can hear you, yes.
I thought that was an excellent summary. The only thing I would add is that I read again today that masks in schools are viewed, short of vaccinations, as the most universally applicable and successful ways to combat this. And that recommendation is from the CDC, IDPH, ISB, the American Association of Pediatrics, and all of the local county health departments. So we've got a united voice on this from at least those who are looking at the science.
Thank you, Mr. Petrarca. Now, board members go around the table here. Any comments or questions at this point that you want to ask Dr. Johns or Mr. Petrarca, or just share? I'll start with Mr. O'Hara.
No, I'm comfortable with being where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taub? Nothing, okay. Mr. Galecki?
No, I'm comfortable as my colleague here as well.
Okay, great. Ms. Siegwin?
Yes, I'm comfortable. Just one question. When we start the off-ramp, Dr. Johns, as far as the communication to the, to the community about that, how far in advance do you think we'll start communicating that out to the community?
First, I want to make sure that we know all the moving parts to the best of our abilities, and that I think will impact us quite a bit. Personally, many of us, my colleagues and I, were surprised by the judge's decision on that Friday night. And it wasn't something we anticipated, we weren't prepared for. We don't want that to happen again.
Right.
And so while we're putting that work into place, what we're trying to do is to do it on a case-by-case basis, to attend to people's needs, and we anticipate learning more. One thing I expect to come when the governor does make an announcement is he gives us time so we can ramp up to it. So right now, while we're working behind the scenes, I think that it will enable us to operate without causing fear and concern. But I'm hoping and anticipating the governor will give us a little time. So at that point, once we know where he's coming from, we're able to respond quickly. There's been speculation about would there be places and times where masks still would be required in a school. That's a really big, piece of information. I had a number of colleagues who came up with a new set of metrics to work off to off ramp on masks. Well, that court case invalidated that for them. So we really need a little more information, but our goal is to communicate well out in advance so that people have time to prepare both how they work with school, both students and staff, how they work with us, what we need to do to help accommodate them. There are important accommodations discussions that we have to have for students who have health issues. So the more time we have, the better off we are. And we have to communicate so they can tell us if they have concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Siegman. Dr. Steinberg?
I'm most comfortable. I think it's a good plan. I just to go back. I think our issue now is climate more than anything else. I'm having a hard time figuring out how our sons, our daughters are responding to the way our parents are treating each other. So mask optional or mask not optional. I will be more aware of how we go back to some sort of civility. I believe, at least if I have to go by every student that spoke today from both sides, kids are doing a great job. They're keeping the tone of the voice. They're being expressful and careful on the words that they use. I hope that continues that way, because if there's something that we cannot allow ourselves to do, this is an open meeting. People can come and they have the right to say what they feel and how they feel. But we need to make sure that in school, while those rights are protected, the climate doesn't go the way that it goes here.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that is probably my biggest concern. When I came here to the Glenbrooks, immediately I was struck by the culture of, first of all, of excellence, but of support. Students helping each other where they may not be anything alike, but they're still supporting each other. Staff supporting students, students supporting staff. It is a really unique school district climate, and I don't want to lose that. And that's my fear. But I also know that some of the things that were so essential to making that culture stick and be repeated year after year for decades is still in place. I think of the peer mentor program. I was thinking about this over the weekend. We're all wearing masks. There's 100 kids there as they're preparing to help our freshmen and sophomores who haven't been part of school in the same way that we all know it. And they were excited out of their minds, wearing masks, but getting prepared to make sure the culture of the Glenbrooks continues. But we'll have to keep an eye on it. We're going to have to, because what we know is there's going to be a distribution where some have been, the time away from school has been really hard. And we're going to need to make sure that we apply a special attention and interventions to help them come along the way too. So thank you for bringing that up.
My last point, I don't know if this is possible or not, but I would like to keep people informed of the metrics, even if we go to mandatory, because then for people who are more concerned, I think you mentioned, and I'm not sure if that's the right number, but when we came back from winter break, there was about 25%, or what was the number of positive cases, the percentage? Was a large percentage.
It was very high.
Right. So while it's not good, on the other hand, if I'm concerned, but I know that there's a large percentage of people in school that basically temporarily they are immune to it, it makes me feel a little bit better. Not just to be clear, not that people had it, but for people to know where they stand.
Yeah,
so those that decide, it may be a tiebreaker for somebody who may be on the fence. Do I wear a mask or do I don't wear a mask? And then knowing that I'm safer, I'm willing to take the mask.
I am happy to do that. If things were to go the other way, I want to know that as early as possible too. So I'll continue doing that. I know we have quite a few people that are actually following it now. Our numbers have gone down tremendously. I think we hit a little over 2,500 shortly after winter break, 2,500 cases per 100,000. And my numbers are going to be a little fuzzy. I wrote them down, but I'm not sure where. I think yesterday we're at 282, which we would have been appalled at a year and a half ago. Now we're grateful for it. But I'll continue doing that because this isn't gone. We will have another variant and we have to be prepared.
That's a good point. Mr. Schein?
Fine with the general direction. Very comfortable. One question, we heard a number of comments about students with various disabilities and accommodation. So I would ask, how can we maybe better handle that? Because it seems like we may have a little bit of a one size fits all because that's the nature of what's happening. But just like we handle other disabilities, I'd like us to be sensitive so those students can continue to have a great experience, and also that we just because we have a general rule doesn't mean there aren't times for exceptions that are reasonable. So thank you for everything.
And you're absolutely right. Some of these, we're going to need to proactively reach out to students and staff who have legitimate concerns that would fall underneath the ADA. And we'll need to reach out and look through and treat each one on a case-by-case basis and make sure we come to some accommodations that are right for them. And as we know, the ADA could make everybody in the room have to change some things in order to make that student be able to participate in that class. So those are some things we're still learning about, but we, as always, follow the law, and the ADA is one of those laws that we follow.
That's all we'll take in. Mr. Gladkey.
Well, it was actually along those same lines regarding accommodation. So thank you, Mr. Shine, for asking that question. It came to mind. In terms of that, if there's something we can also do, be more visible about how parents can notify staff, because not always know what the right channel is. So we have the wonderful new website and everything. Can we add a tile or something where if people have questions about accommodations and the steps legally that they need to start to, whether mask or not mask, how they can start reaching out and discussing that with the appropriate people?
Yep. Any other comments at this point? Okay. You'll keep us informed. We're going to keep our eyes peeled and ears open because things could change, and we'll stay on top of that as we go forward. So thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Petrarca, for joining us for that discussion and being available. We're going to move now to what is new item, I think it's 7 now, which is the discussion and actions on policies and procedures. And I know that Dr. Gravel, Mr. Swanson, and others have been working on these very hard. We have an enormous number of policies, and they're summarized and put forth. And just so we're clear on this, we'll provide a summary tonight and field some questions, and then we'll come back on consent unless there's reason not to have a consent on the 28th. So that's procedurally where we are. But I will turn it over to you, Mr. Swanson.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening. We just wanted to, we do have a number of policy recommendations this evening. And so not to be overwhelmed by them, but there are 28 listed there. But just as a point of interest, some of them, a good number, are sunset recommendations. So in other words, they're being folded into possibly procedures being folded into policies or other policies that are no longer needed with some consolidation. So just to simplify things. But to back up just a minute to share with the board, in many discussions with the administration, we have crafted a, I'll say a renewed commitment or effort in regards to policy revision and procedure revision. To review them on a more timely basis, to obviously be able to be a little bit more nimble in regards to creation or revision as needed. We certainly will look to the Board of Education, superintendent, and other administrator recommendations, even the Illinois Association of School Board press resources in regards to those revisions. So I just wanted to acknowledge that all of those different resources, as well as staff recommendations or discussions in the building, could lead to prioritization of the review of policy or procedures. We also will have an ongoing rotation for them as well. I will be overseeing the larger process, but we will certainly throughout the process of review in early stages, mid stages, and final stages, include staff and stakeholders appropriately so that we have good communication and collaboration in regards to the revision or the changes that may impact the implementation in the buildings. So that's a brief overview of what we are working on and how some of our policy, the process, I should say, of our policy has changed a little bit. A deep thank you to Mr. Dowdy and Mr. O'Hara for serving on the board policy committee, along with Dr. Johns and Dr. Gavell and myself. And we do offer a large number of policies for any discussion today. We certainly can answer questions as a committee or individuals, and we would like to bring them back for action at the next meeting.
Okay, now I know there was a summary of sorts. Could you just could you spend just a couple of minutes just to walk me through those policies and open it up to questions?
Sure. Probably I'm going to tag team that a little bit with RJ, if that's okay, simply because we both have worked on different ones from time to time. The first one that these are in order of numeric order, which is also a little bit odd sometimes unless you know the full policy manual about how policies are grouped together. So forgive us in regards to the topic, certainly bounce around a little bit. But the administrative personnel procedure is one that we are recommending a few different changes within. One is to clarify granted legal and granted holidays for administrators, more clearly define what they are. Also to acknowledge a practice that has been in place for, I believe, a year or two, in which a flex and fringe benefit is now embedded into the base salary, and to acknowledge that in policy. And then also to make sure that individuals covered by this policy are more clearly defined and referenced in their job description. So some housekeeping pieces in regards to policy 3020. And I don't know if you want to.
No, that's
entertain
plenty. I
questions
just
or
wanted,
just
is
go
there
through.
any other salient points about the policies you want us, I know there's a memo. I just want to see if there are any more salient points that you want to highlight.
Okay. Moving on to 6070. This is a policy specific to educational support personnel tuition reimbursement. So I'm going to defer to RJ, but I believe this is connected a little bit with our recent negotiations in regards to more clarification in regards to how non-certified individuals receive tuition reimbursement.
Absolutely. So yes, 6070 policy and procedures. First and foremost, the procedures are recommended to be sunset because they have been able to be embedded into the policy. And we also have updated our rates. It's been quite some time since we've reevaluated our tuition reimbursement schedule for non-licensed personnel. And this is in line with recent collective negotiations. I'll just kind of share just a few more updates here real quick before I turn it over or turn it back to Mr. Swanson. Policy 6110, voluntary termination benefits for teachers, provides clarification regarding how the school district pays out termination benefits for teachers. So it's more about timeline and process. And then there was also a legacy carryover regarding some TRS pension considerations that have been adjusted. Mileage reimbursement and jury duty, two of my favorites. They simply reflect current practice. It's been a large number of years since those policies have been reviewed. So those again are process adjustments. And then real quickly, all of the policies that involve the words education support personnel, these are our policies that specifically apply to individuals not represented by a collective bargaining unit. And as you can see, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 8 policies that are recommended to be sunset. That's because when we were reviewing the policy manual, we found that all of our other work groups have all of the work groups benefits in a single policy and procedures. But for ESPs, it was spread over a large number of them. So we consolidated and made parallel in our policy manual for educational support personnel. Again, those are benefits and salary considerations that are for our non-represented employee groups. I have just one more in here. I want to really express significant or sincere thanks to our assistant principals for student activities. That's Mr. Mark Maranto and Dr. Michael Tarjan, as well as our entire cabinet administrative team, and a tremendous amount of feedback from our sponsors and individuals and programs. We celebrate a comprehensive high school experience, and that does involve a level of travel so that our students can compete at the national level, state and national level, forgive me. And previously, we had a large number of policies, guidelines, procedures, and over 2 years, a revised policy has been in the making, And we're very pleased to put forth a recommendation that makes it very clear the school district's expectations for those trips, considerations such as making sure that should something happen, I knock on wood that we won't experience it again in our lifetimes, but if a pandemic happens and trips get canceled, we want to make sure that students are protected and our parents' investments are protected because some of those trips are quite costly and we want to make sure they have some insurance there. We also want to make sure that as we have school-sponsored travel that is part of our co-curricular programs or other essential activities, that we are consistent in our application of how district taxpayer funds are being used. And so just a tremendous amount of effort going into one document so that we can have everything in a single space that's updated based on current practice, as opposed to being spread over multiple documents. And with that, I'll transition back over to Mr. Swanson.
No, yes, no, that's fine. Did you have anything else you wanted to add? Is it
Well, one other policy we'll talk about, but let's.
Go ahead.
I can wait. It just was on that one.
Okay.
But
Well, let me just talk about one other one that kind of stands out, and that is 7110. And that essentially is offering a procedure or procedures for service animal requests, which we have not had before in policy or in procedure. And so a thanks to Jennifer Pearson, Director of Special Education, to clarify and help us define these procedures. We also talked with numerous staff members because this will, when implemented, of course, impact how classes may have service animals involved in their day-to-day existence, and that was important to process how this would come to be. And so we have decided to include in 7110, which was our existing policy for education of students with disabilities, to add a reference to the policy that is more robust in defining the roles and responsibilities on how service animal requests would be made and how we would implement if those requests were granted. So that was a large discussion in recent weeks. So any other questions that we may entertain in regards to these policies were referenced?
Let's start with Dr. Steinberg. Thank you for your patience.
thank you. I'll just go back to the travel policy and the insurance. And I know we have different types of school supported travel where sometimes the school puts some money into it. Sometimes it's only the parents. And I think this is important to have the insurance because we've seen it in the past, having issues with that. Now, how is this enforceable from our point of view? So we always approve travel, right? So it comes to the board, and I'm assuming whoever organizes is going to be looking to have insurance into it.
Yes.
How can we make sure that this is implemented? Because at the end helps everybody.
Certainly. So we do have an approval process for trips. I'll parallel that with a different type of policy, which is our facility rental policy. We always had a facility rental policy, but what we've done here is we've tightened up and clarified the procedures. For instance, before any purchase is made, there has to be another level of verification to ensure that all of these elements are addressed, and that's actually done not at the school level, but at the district level. And actually, it's either myself or an individual in my office. Again, to make sure, it may be an insurance policy. It might simply be the purchase, if we think of airline tickets, refundable airline tickets as opposed to non-refundable. And so we'll work with the sponsors, and it'll probably take us a good 6 months to a year to get into a good rhythm as we're working through this. We also are proactively working to look, because we do a lot of small travel, a lot of large travel, looking at if there's a benefit of the district having for lack of a better term, a travel consultant to help us with that on a consistent basis. And so at the end of the day, it comes down to more levels of accountability and additional layers of approval.
So a quick follow-up. I was going towards the end of your comment. Same way we did with the rental facility, where we added that if the people that were renting didn't have their own insurance, we were the ones choosing one.
Correct.
I wonder if there's a way to figure out most of these travel insurance have come from separate companies, even the airline wants you. So if, I don't want to add more work to everybody, but if we could figure out a way to have something like that, where it may be the case, parents going to Hawaii, then the trip is expensive already. And then you say you have to pay insurance and insurance.
Yep.
If there's a way for us to help in terms of, you don't want to take the one that the travel agency is offering you, there's an alternative here that may be costing the same or not. But
No, so Dr. Steinberg brings up a very important point, and I get very excited about this, so I'm going to try to minimize my comments. When you go and purchase travel, we all know there's a checkbox. Typically, we do it online, and you can add travel insurance. There's a cost there. We recognize that cost, it's probably a cost that also has a level of commission that's being paid to the person selling and things of that nature. So we've already worked with SCRIMP, our liability consortium, to identify separate policies that we might actually purchase at a much lower cost on an umbrella basis, meaning it would cover everyone, that would ultimately lead to lower costs, whether it be for the district if the district's absorbing or our parents. So I think we're on the exact same wavelength there. It's not ideal for all options, but it certainly is ideal for those larger trips that we start to celebrate in the athletics, in the performing arts and things of that nature.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other board, Ms.
I have
Seaman?
one question on the first one around administrative personnel. Two questions. How are administrative personnel being defined? Like who is that exactly?
Sorry. We did have a full listing of all of those jobs in a previous version of the policy. It was recommended that we do not have a list by list of job titles. Instead, say that the job description will define the administrative roles. Okay, that's kind of a first thing.
Okay.
In regards to the policies being simplified or not having a position listed there, because every time a position may change a little bit, or with recommendation, now we're going to go back to a revision of policy. The easiest way, I guess, to answer your question is that there are certified and non-certified administrators. Most of the administrators are certified, so those would be your instructional supervisors through superintendent in regards to the certified side. And we have a handful of non-certified administrators. Those would be individuals such as our building plant operations and plant managers, building managers rather. We also have some directors who are non-certified. So it's a possibility that an HR director or an HR individual or a business individual could be an administrator but be non-certified, meaning they didn't necessarily come through teaching ranks.
Okay.
So that's a general answer for you, but I can be more specific if needed.
Okay, so this procedure 3020 is capturing all of those, the certified and the
correct.
non-certified. Okay.
That's correct.
And then just one follow-up question that on point 2 where it says removes the flex fringe benefit, additional earnings for administrators, which has since been embedded into the base salary for administrators and eliminated as a standalone rate. Can you explain to me how that works? I don't understand that.
Good to know.
Sure. Historically, instead of including all administrative compensation in a base salary, there was the base salary, and now to use the visual, plus what was called a flex and a fringe. And now I'm forgetting the exact amounts of those. When we originally revised this policy back in 2019, there was the natural question of, well, if everyone gets this and it's part of their salary, why would it not just be part of the base salary, which also is subsequently reported, made available for the public, and it's all in one document. The only answer is historical practice. And so we work through, forgive me, this was right as the pandemic was coming on. We worked through embedding that amount into the base salary, which means it no longer needs to be remitted separately, but procedures were not updated to reflect that. And so now when individuals are moving through what their salary is, right, and each year should an increase be approved, it's already embedded there. And then when new administrators are hired, their salaries reflect that level as opposed to having the add-on benefit.
Okay.
One thing to add, the dollar amounts of those, $600 for flex and $700 for fringe.
Okay.
So, I mean, in the big picture, those are smaller numbers in regards to the salary, but those were always kind of confusing or a standalone type of compensation in those smaller dollar amounts. And there was a lot of discussion to simplify.
Okay. And then I guess what does it mean? What is a flex benefit or a fringe benefit? Like, what is that?
A flex or a fringe benefit is it's an amount of money that may or may not be considered taxable at a certain level or creditable at a certain level for pension purposes.
Okay.
Across all of our employee groups, there were levels of flex and fringe, and candidly, many of them date back well before my arrival, and some were at one level, others were at another level. Throughout our processes, even with our bargaining units, we've really worked to try to streamline those as much as possible so that they weren't so standalone, especially since so many of them were grandfathered. So if you were hired before this date, but after this date, you got this, hired after this date, and so on and so forth. So it was just another way of offering compensation. I tried to dig through all of the policy that I could to get a better understanding of why this was labeled this way and this was labeled that way. And unfortunately, on that particular topic, I was not able to find substantial explanation.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful for me.
Any other questions on policies at
So
this
kind of-
point? Oh, Mr. Blackie.
So kind of related to my colleague's question about the fringe benefit, what's a current example of what would a fringe benefit be under the revised policy?
There would be no flex or fringe benefits for administrators.
None.
Zero.
Okay. And then I appreciate all the folks, the stakeholders that were involved in this. It'd be helpful, and I don't know if the policy committee gets this, but a report of who are those stakeholders that are involved with each one to see who they're representing. One, to thank them, but two, if there's also questions that arise, I think it'd be helpful if it's in the public record.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, we should track. That's a good, we can track that, I assume.
If I can add something, and this may be already in the policy, you know how policies have like certain amount of dates of time for people to read it before it becomes official in general. So the same way that there's the channel.
An effective date.
Yes.
Kind of commentary period. And effective date
Exactly.
you're recommending.
So I don't want to complicate things, but because we reach to certain number of stakeholders, and sometimes there may be other people who may be interested as well. I don't know how to, that normally, you know, our schools, our places have a website or a place where all the policies are there. And then if you work for the school or something, you can look at these policies and have a comment. That's
No, and I think part of the theory along those lines is not only do you all reach out to the stakeholders, you try to identify that list, but then we always bring policies in once or twice before we vote on them, which makes it, first gives Mr. O'Hara and I are on the committee, but you gives everyone a chance to have comments and questions, at least a couple of weeks for people to comment at that point. And that's how we design it. So there is time, and once in a while, we have an exigent circumstance, but almost never have we had to do that. So it's a good idea to make sure people have a chance to comment. And obviously, you're always trying to proactively identify.
Yeah,
So thank you for that.
In particular, I think there are two groups. One is the constituency, the people that live in the district, which they hear from us every time it comes here, and this is public. Sometimes the people that work for the district, if they could find earlier than because the image is that when it comes to a board meeting, I wouldn't say done deal, but because we look at it and we try to make sure that it's okay. But just to have another idea, it's too late by the time it came to the board.
So you're suggesting to put with if it's a policy that is being considered to post it somewhere, almost like a Federal Register situation, where
Yeah,
somebody can see it
somewhat.
on the website.
Yeah. If I can, Mr. Swanson has a few words on this
No,
topic.
well, actually, I was going to clarify a little bit about, and I appreciate the suggestion. So I think what I'm hearing is for us to maybe, for example, say that such and such policy would become effective on a given date.
Yeah.
And that would be more clear to our community, our staff, whoever the case may be. Because right now we really don't have a date of implementation listed. We have just a discussion and action, and someone may say, that was a pretty fast discussion and action happened in 2 meetings, right? Depending on their perspective on the topic. So to bring it for discussion at the discussion stage with the board, a possible implementation date,
Yeah,
recommendation for.
Also, I'll use you were talking about fringe benefit. If I'm an employee that I'm affected by that, I'm sure they have representatives of the employees at the table, just to add another layer where there's a communication, so people can know about it. Nothing against whoever represents people at the table, which just one more check mark. So because the policy is going to affect me, I'm not surprised at the board meeting, oh, well, now my benefits are changing or something like that.
So why don't you take into consideration some great thoughts, a way that we can make sure that the information is that much more available to people who may be affected by the policy, but obviously don't want to interrupt your hard work. And I know there's an enormous amount ahead with all the policy revision, but thank you for those suggestions. Did you have something else?
No, I was just going to kind of a schedule of here are the policies we'll be reviewing, and then what the potential effective dates are, et cetera. So.
And effective dates are generally whether we vote. So it'd be an expected vote, which makes it effective usually as of that date or whatever you choose. Any other comments or questions on policies, folks?
Appreciate all the hard work.
Yeah, it's an enormous task, and it may seem a little dry at points, but honestly, it affects every part of our district. It's sort of our local law. So it's greatly appreciated, and the keeping up on all the changes that come out of our legislature and our regulatory bodies is an enormous effort. So thank you for all the efforts that people undertake for those.
I say to you and Matt that are in the committee as well, because we all are in different committees, but I know this one is very hands-on.
No,
so.
thank you. And Mr. O'Hara has jumped right in. So very appreciated to have a colleague on this. So that's good. Okay, so this is going to come back for possible action on the 28th. And usually that works on consent, and then it'll become effective usually that date. That's how it gets filled in. But let's think through the promulgation process. And I know you work really, really hard with the identified stakeholders, but if you can think of a process for that, Mr. Swanson, as you're undertaking this substantial task, that'd be great. I appreciate it very much. And okay, we're okay. Questions? Any other questions come up during the next couple weeks, please raise them because you'll see them again in front of you in your next packet. Then we move to adjusted item 8, which is the discussion and action on school operating budget. Dr. Johnson, anything on that?
Real quickly, this is part of our annual process for establishing budgets for the upcoming year. Dr. Gravel is going to walk through how we establish and develop budgets for each of the schools. Each of the schools has their own budget for covering and obtaining services and features for the schools, and he'll walk through how we go about this. It's not a vote item, it's just an information item for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Johns. So as a reminder, the school district builds its budget through very much a building block process. Our firm foundation is always in our teachers, our support personnel, our administrators, and all of those positions, which do represent the largest expense within the school budget. And I know the board will hear a preliminary discussion on the staffing levels on our licensed personnel, actually in the next agenda item. Another portion that we always bring to the Board of Education are our school operating budgets. These are the funds that are directly managed by our associate principals for administrative services. That's Ms. Lauren Bonner and Mr. Casey Wright. And I won't restate everything that's in the memo, but think of those expenses such as department supplies, transportation for different day field trips, or transportation even for our extracurricular activities, employee overtime, substitute personnel expenses when it's not as a result of a sick day or a personal day per se, but when it's a result of staff attending professional development. Our school district really has emphasized for many generations the concept of local control and oversight of a level of expenditures, and these budgets are very much in line with that. The budget formula went through a comprehensive overhaul actually right before the pandemic and went into effect for the 2020-21 school year. It's composed of 2 primary elements. One is a basic allocation that's naturally split, and the other is a per student allocation. The reason for that per student allocation is recognizing that some expenses related to the operation of a school building are a direct result of the number of students enrolled in that building, whereas other expenses are shared. For instance, both schools have extremely wonderful but large and complex theaters or auditoriums. Both schools have 2 large-scale swimming pools and things of that nature. And so when you think of those commonalities, having large buildings, they just have certain expenses that both schools incur. And that's why we have a basic allocation and then the per student allocation. I think we all are aware that inflation is a reality in our society right now, and the cost of goods are increasing. For example, the cost of transportation expenses are increasing contractually by 3% for next year. In addition, the cost of goods we've seen on a sliding scale, some have dropped in cost, some have raised slightly, but it is most certainly not uncommon for a 2 to 3%, if not greater, increase in costs. And so after reviewing the actual budgets, which are built using a zero-based budget philosophy, so while the schools have a maximum that they can spend through the allocation, they truly do go through an item by item, case by case, department by department basis, making sure that through the budget process they understand what their projected expenses are, and they also budget for unanticipated expenses. But our recommendation is to increase that overall budget by 3%. Now, when you look at the math, you might say, well, RJ, you just said 3%, but as we look closer, there's a little more adjustment there. And as the board, some of our board members who have been with us for several years through this process know, we continue every year through our over 5,600 accounts to identify what should be in the school operating budget versus what should be in the district FTE or the salary accounts and so on and so forth. And we found that there was approximately $300,000 of expenses that were currently budgeted in the FTE budget account, yet they actually are signed off on and managed at the building level. And those are what's known as extra days. Some of our positions have extra days, very common for our related services personnel, such as our psychologists, our guidance counselors, things of that nature. And those days are paid through a timesheet, which is ultimately signed off on the building level and tracked. And so this, there's an accounting adjustment for $300,000 that is not an increase in the budget. It's simply moving this expense from what was a district budget account to the school operating budget account. And so I hope I provided just a little background for those who are less familiar with the process, and then also give some insight into that one accounting adjustment that we're doing. I'm happy to entertain any questions from the board. Again, we are not seeking approval tonight. We always go through a 2-step process, but we'll be happy to answer anything.
On the 300,000 then, so the net to the district overall financially is 0. You're just moving it.
For the 300, that's correct.
And then the 3%, I know we have inflation, but inflation is substantially higher than that. Do we think 3% is sufficient?
So after we looked at we basically do a review of a smattering of commonly purchased goods at the school operating level. You look at certain levels of office supplies. Again, transportation is one of the largest expenses. We look at overtime expenses, and substitute expenses. And I think, or Vicki Tarver and I are comfortable with 3%. And we also have other expense accounts built into the district budget should that exceed. But at this point, I'm comfortable with 3.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Hara.
Just real quick. So if you look at, if someone's looking at your chart, they might be a little confused because you started $1.4 million, say in 2019 for GBN, and then you're at $500,000 in 2020 and then $500,000 in 2021. Can you just walk us through?
So forgive me, I'm looking at the chart right now and I'm looking at the bottom line, but where exactly are you looking at?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the per student budget for Glenbrook North High School. For the historical 2019, it was $1.4 million. Then 2020 is $549,000. Then 2021 is $544,000.
Right. So the reason we see adjustments is also student population changes, as well as the amount of money that we're charging or that's being paid. So for instance, in 2021 at Glenbrook North, there were 2,072 students multiplied by 265. And while I'm not checking the calculations in the spreadsheet, that should amount to 549K. And then as we go to the next year, the numbers stayed the same. We did not increase at all for inflation for the 21-22 budget, but student population dropped, which meant the allocation dropped.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you might want to just, for anybody looking at the chart, they might be confused as to why it goes from the $700 per student to the $265.
Oh, forgive me. You're going 1920 to 20.
Yeah, if you just look at the chart, you go like, oh, what just happened?
Yes, and so Mr. O'Hara actually reached out and asked this question. I mentioned that we went through a considerable overhaul of the formula with the Finance Committee, if I recall correctly, again during the 1920 year and was implemented in 2021. I will share that information with the board, but I will also include that as an addendum here because it is good to see that historical amount. And I know Mr. Schein had brought up that importance of emphasizing that historical process and how we've gone from A to B. And so I'll include that just as opposed to me verbally explaining it. Yep.
Mr. Chow, any questions?
Sorry.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, Mr. Webb,
No, not at this time.
Mr. Schein, Dr. Steinberg?
Just a few. And I asked you the same last time. I'm assuming we got federal funding this year, and maybe we go through the same thing where at the end of the period, we still have money that accrues from the year before and so forth. How is that factored into our budget?
So federal funding is not associated with the school operating budget. Historically, and Dr. Williamson is the master of federal grants as well as Mr. Breitag this year. We've always tried to look at very large expenses or very consistent expenses year over year, just because of the unique nature of grant reporting. And so while overages are not shown here, they will be shown in the overall district budget. Great example would be the school district has not yet expended, and I'm forgetting my digits, our ESSER 3 funds, which is the most recent stimulus package under the Biden administration. One of the large projects that the facilities committee will talk about towards the end of this fiscal year is a further deep dive review of our building automation system that controls our ventilation and things of that nature. So we'll bring that up at that point and then also provide a dashboard so that the board can see all of that money, what we call carryover funds, if you will.
Okay, the last two, I think they're mixed. This has an impact on the budget as the school population is fluctuating. And if I'm not wrong, the GBS population is supposed to go a little bit down while the GBN population is going to go up. In terms of hiring, our largest resource is personnel, and part of our personnel are tenured personnel. So how we adapt the practice for where we have, I know there are retirements every year, but and I don't know if this is the school principals who are looking at this or instruction supervisor, how to make sure that every school is properly balanced in terms of having enough resources to do what they do, and not to have, sometimes conservatively, you don't hire too many people on the tenure line because you don't know how things are going to go, but just to make sure that both schools are balanced in terms of personnel, in terms of, I don't know how to call it, it's not quality, but really seniority / standing with the group.
Yeah, our school district is very fortunate to have, we'll just call it a bell curve, if you will, of some veteran teachers, and then we have some new individuals that are coming in the classroom and absolutely rocking it for later in the evening. And what I will say is, Mr. Swanson, when we get to the next agenda item, we'll actually talk about our staffing formula. There's just recognizing that our students have experienced challenges over the last few years. Our teachers have persevered through some of the most difficult times, but they also, or all of these difficult times have presented recognition that we have more training, more growth, development opportunities, right? And so this year's FTE takes some of those things into consideration by keeping our levels as high as possible, but also recognize areas for ongoing growth, such as instructional coaching and things of that nature, and also providing additional support to assist our students who might be struggling. at different levels. And so some of that will be addressed in today's FTE presentation. And then I think we'll have some more ongoing conversations. That's not part of the school operating budget per se, but it is the most important expenditure of the school district, making sure we have highly qualified and exceptional educators for our kids.
Thank you.
Excellent, Ms. Siegman.
No questions.
Excellent. Okay, so folks, this will come back on the 28th. Dr. Gravel, is that correct?
Yes, it'll come back on the 28th on consent. Presenting here this evening allows our budget managers, again, Casey and Lauren, to start their process. And then I just want to give a little teaser reminder that we have an upcoming facilities committee, as I recall, the week before the next board meeting, where we will talk about an amazing enhancement recommendation to complete a years-long process for our learning spaces. So that's not in the school operating budget, but it is another thing that will directly impact our schools. And some of that used to be funded through the school operating budget. It won't be funded for next year. Through that, it'll be through separate line. But just want to keep you thinking about what that could be, because I think you're going to really be excited when we gather next.
Is that part of, did you merge facilities and finance?
No, they're separate.
They're still separate.
Yes, sir.
Well, we consider ourselves teased, and we will look forward to hearing more.
Mr. Dowdy, just one question. When will we receive the explanation on the revised formula? Because I'm interested in learning that. You're going to send it before the next meeting?
Yes, I'm going to send it actually in just a few moments, and it'll also be as embedded in the attachment.
Okay, great.
For the next one, but I'll send it right now.
It's really long, Michelle.
Okay.
It's not very long. It's very short.
All righty.
Minimal for RJ.
All right, so we will troop forward to item, I think it's new item 9, which is the Certified General Education Staffing Authorization, FTE, and Dr. Jones.
Thank you. This again is part of our annual process that prepares us for the next school year. In this particular memo that Mr. Swanson is going to take us through, it's going to outline the staffing needs that we project that we'll have for next year.
Mr. Swanson.
Thank you. Dr. Gravel alluded to a formula, and simply stated we utilize projected enrollment for next year, as well as current registration or historical registration in courses, to then project what we believe the staffing allocation should be for each department, and collect that, of course, into the allocation for the building and then therefore the district. So even though you are seeing before you an allocation for North and for South and for the district, it really is in the deeper dive of the data representing the formula that helps us get to those levels for English or math or social studies, et cetera. Okay, so the summary statement really is that the recommendation is for 169.9 full-time equivalents, FTE, for North, 231.7 FTE for South, 395.6 FTE for the district overall. A couple comments in regards to the tables on the memo as well. You can see that the first table essentially is comparing the projected for next year, or the recommended for next year, 22-23, to the current year, 21-22. And that is a complete overall staffing number that I just actually stated as well. So in other words, that number is not necessarily representative of, I'm sorry, that does include all staff, regardless if their particular position is related to student enrollment. So for instance, you have a principal, regardless of the size of the enrollment, you have an athletic director, you have an English IS, that kind of thing. So the second table, based on a discussion with the Board of Education a year ago, asked for a little more information, really specifically to that student to staff ratio number, to outline if those I'll call them for the discussion, fixed positions were removed and only staff were represented that were directly connected to the student enrollment formula, what would the student to staff ratio look like for the buildings and also for the district? So that's really the added information in regards to the second table.
Okay, so I'm sorry, so the first, what constitutes the staff in table one? What constitutes the staff in table two? Can you perhaps, I may have missed that. Could you?
Well, the staffing in table one is the entire staffing for the district.
Got
The
it.
staffing in table two